The manhwa opens with the female protagonist slowly waking from a deep sleep. Warmth surrounds her body, making her feel unusually comfortable, and in her hazy state she assumes that her drinking companions from the previous night are probably still partying somewhere nearby. Thinking lazily to herself, she internally tells them to continue enjoying themselves while she sleeps a little longer. However, a man's low voice suddenly reaches her ears, completely shattering that peaceful mood. He remarks that after what she has done to him, there is no possible way for him to fall asleep now. His tone immediately confuses her. She wonders if everyone drank so heavily that they completely ruined their voices overnight. Not only does the voice sound unfamiliar, but the speech pattern itself resembles something straight out of a historical drama. Before she can process the situation properly, the man reaches out and lightly pinches her cheek. The sharp sting makes her complain instinctively, wondering why he would suddenly do something that painful. Yet instead of apologizing, the man seems even more puzzled than she is, commenting on how she is now speaking informally even outside of private settings. The female protagonist becomes increasingly irritated and confused. She thinks that the voice he is using does not suit him at all and tells herself that the joke has already gone too far. To her, it feels as though everyone around her is intentionally picking apart every tiny thing she says. Still groggy, she finally forces her eyes open properly, expecting to see one of her female friends nearby. Instead, she finds herself staring directly into the face of a man. The sight instantly shocks her awake. Her surroundings are even stranger. The room is dark and illuminated only by candlelight flickering from antique lamps. Beside her lies a half-naked man, while she herself is dressed in nothing more than a thin slip. The atmosphere is intimate enough to make her entire body freeze in horror. Panicking, she immediately assumes that she must have attacked him while drunk. The man calmly confirms her suspicion, explaining that she climbed on top of him herself and even undressed him with her own hands. Hearing that makes her mortified beyond belief. She hurriedly apologizes, insisting internally that she is never normally this reckless when intoxicated. The man, however, appears completely unbothered by the situation. To him, nothing about the previous night seems unpleasant. Yet the female protagonist cannot simply accept that answer so easily. In her mind, brushing off such an incident as fine feels absolutely ridiculous. Embarrassed to death, she quickly tries to get away from him. Before she can move properly, the man grabs her wrist and stops her. Rather than showing anger, he openly admits that he actually enjoyed what happened between them. His words instantly cause her face to burn bright red. Then, as though the atmosphere between them is perfectly natural, he suggests continuing what they had apparently been doing before. The statement completely destroys her remaining composure. Her thoughts spiral into chaos as she wonders what exactly he means by continue. At the same time, the man points out that if she keeps moving around carelessly she might fall, adding that she should remain on top instead. Those words only make her panic even harder. In her frantic attempt to escape the awkward position, both of them lose balance and tumble over together. Their bodies collapse onto the bed in a tangled mess, leaving them lying directly on top of each other. Shocked and flustered, she hurriedly checks whether he is injured from the fall. The man calmly assures her that he is perfectly fine, though he immediately asks if she herself is hurt. Then he calls her by the name Liana. That single name instantly causes her thoughts to freeze. Confused, she internally denies it at once because she is definitely not someone named Liana. Before she can question him further, several guards suddenly rush into the room in alarm after hearing the noise. The moment they enter, they immediately address the man with utmost respect, referring to him as His Majesty. At that point, the horrifying truth finally crashes into her mind. The man beside her is none other than Philip, the emperor of this country, and she herself has apparently become Lady Liana. The realization leaves her utterly speechless. Nothing about the situation makes any logical sense to her. Yet after piecing together all the clues, she slowly arrives at one unbelievable conclusion. She has somehow been transported into the world of the infamous mature romance novel she had been reading before falling asleep. It is the absurdly explicit story with the ridiculous title Why Did the Princess Roll Around in the Rose Garden? A novel so shamelessly depraved that she had been too embarrassed to even finish reading it properly. Now, trapped inside that very world, she bitterly regrets not finishing the story when she still had the chance. Still unable to process the absurd situation she has found herself in, Liana immediately questions Philip about everything that supposedly happened earlier. However, instead of looking offended or embarrassed, the Emperor merely responds with calm exhaustion, mentioning that this is already the 5th time he has explained the situation to her. According to him, she suddenly barged into his chambers during the night and climbed directly onto his bed. Not only that, but she repeatedly complained about feeling hot before removing her own clothes without hesitation. Despite the shocking explanation, Philip casually assures her that there is nothing for her to worry about. That statement nearly makes her lose her mind. From Liana's perspective, whether or not there is something to worry about is not even the main issue anymore. The far bigger problem is the fact that she apparently climbed on top of the emperor of the entire nation. In her mind, that alone sounds punishable by death several times over. Yet Philip remains strangely unconcerned. Instead, he calmly recalls hearing rumors that Liana enjoys drinking excessively and wonders whether her condition might simply be alcohol-induced amnesia. He advises her to reduce her alcohol consumption in the future. Left with no better response, she awkwardly agrees that she will at least attempt to cut down. As she stares at him, her thoughts drift toward the original story. Liana possesses shining golden hair and clear green eyes, looking almost identical to the novel's heroine, Alicia. In the original plot, however, Liana is nothing more than a stereotypical villainess who appears briefly at the beginning before meeting an early death. She is greedy for money, obsessed with power, and hopelessly addicted to alcohol. On top of that, she constantly schemes in an attempt to crush the Emperor's reputation and eventually become Empress herself. While she is lost in thought, Philip suddenly calls out to her again. With complete seriousness, he reminds her that he is not food, so if she is hungry he can simply order an actual meal instead. He casually adds that eating hair would probably upset her stomach. The bizarre comment immediately leaves her horrified. She hurriedly insists that she is not hungry at all and internally agrees that, yes, people absolutely should not eat emperors. At the same time, however, she cannot stop questioning whether this man truly is the same emperor from the novel she remembers. His personality feels completely different. The emperor described in this story is notoriously tyrannical, sensitive, and obsessively fastidious to the point of severe misophobia. Among all the male leads, he is the only one who never becomes physically involved with the heroine. He ruthlessly punishes anyone who touches him even slightly, earning terrifying nicknames such as the Mad Tyrant. Servants are dismissed simply for brushing against him accidentally, while others are exiled merely for standing too close. Most importantly, he constantly interrupts intimate moments before they can escalate into explicit scenes, making him infamous throughout the fandom for all sorts of strange rumors. Remembering all of that suddenly causes her blood to run cold. A horrifying realization strikes her. She touched him. Not only did she touch him, she apparently climbed all over him. At that moment, she becomes convinced that she is about to get herself executed on the very first day after transmigrating into this world. Meanwhile, Philip continues speaking as though none of this is unusual. He casually wonders whether she also forgot the strange wish she made earlier. In his opinion, losing entire chunks of memory after drinking this much is serious enough that she should probably seek treatment. Then he calmly reveals the part that shocks her the most. Apparently, she had previously insisted on touching his body. Philip explains that although many people have touched him before, something strange happens whenever Liana does it. Unlike everyone else, her touch does not cause discomfort or revulsion. Instead, his body feels completely fine around her. Because of that, he suspects she may possess some ability capable of healing his condition. With perfect composure, he opens his shirt slightly and asks her to touch him again properly so he can confirm the theory. He even reminds her that this was supposedly what she wanted in the first place. Liana's mind immediately spirals into chaos. She cannot stop wondering what kind of insane things the original owner of this body had been doing before she possessed her. Yet as she stares at Philip's exposed chest, another thought slowly enters her head. The unusual remarks, the casually revealed upper body, the gloves he continues wearing despite everything else, the strangely calm confidence. All of it makes her begin suspecting that the Emperor's personal tastes might be far stranger than the novel ever implied. Regardless of whatever tragic or bizarre backstory exists behind his behavior, she decides that escaping this room is her top priority. Suppressing the cold sweat running down her back, Liana awkwardly explains that although she understands he wants to test his theory, she truly is not feeling well today. Therefore, perhaps they should continue this experiment another time instead. Philip quietly observes her twitching facial muscles and pale complexion before concluding that her condition really does seem serious. He tells her that they can postpone the matter and suggests she rest for now. Then, as if sincerely concerned, he casually mentions that the palace employs a renowned physician specializing in alcohol addiction and wonders whether he should summon him immediately. The suggestion terrifies her even more. Liana instantly jumps to her feet and hurriedly insists that there is absolutely no need for that because she can handle the situation herself. After hastily announcing that she will take her leave now, she prepares to escape the room as quickly as possible. Philip watches her in silence before questioning whether she can even make it back safely on her own. Trying desperately to preserve at least a shred of dignity, Liana confidently declares that she is not a child and can obviously return alone. The moment she steps outside the room, however, her thoughts immediately become frantic again. She begins considering whether she should search for some kind of smuggling route or escape method immediately because there is no telling when that terrifying tyrant might suddenly change his mind and execute her after all. Behind her, Philip quietly wonders why she is acting so strangely. Then, just as she is about to leave completely, Liana abruptly turns back toward him and awkwardly asks a question that leaves the atmosphere momentarily silent. She asks whether he happens to know where her house is. Back at her house, Liana lets out a weary groan, her entire body heavy with exhaustion from the previous night's events. Barely able to keep her eyes open, she weakly asks her maid for some water. The maid promptly obeys, returning with a cup filled with warm liquid before carefully handing it over to her mistress. Liana absent-mindedly raises the cup to her lips and takes a large sip, expecting ordinary water. However, the moment the liquid touches her tongue, her expression twists in horror. She immediately spits everything out, coughing violently as she stares at the cup in disbelief. The sharp taste burns through her senses, making her demand to know what exactly she has just been given. The maid appears completely unfazed by her reaction and calmly explains that it is the same thing Liana drinks every single day, clearly unable to understand why she is suddenly acting so shocked by it. Hearing that only makes Liana even more horrified as she exclaims that no sane person drinks alcohol immediately after waking up in the morning. To her surprise, the maid casually replies that the very person who does such a thing is none other than Liana herself. Hearing that, Liana lets out a defeated sigh while pressing her fingers against her aching forehead. It becomes painfully obvious to her that the original owner of this body truly lived recklessly. At least one thing eases her mind slightly despite everything that happened the previous night. It seems Philip safely brought her back home without causing any trouble. For that much, she feels somewhat grateful toward the Emperor. However, that gratitude does not change the fact that he is still an unpredictable pervert in her eyes. She firmly reminds herself that she absolutely cannot get involved with a man like him any further. No matter what happened between them the previous night, she knows she must avoid him as much as possible from now on. Still, a vague sense of unease lingers in her chest. As she struggles to recall the events from the previous night, she suddenly remembers that Philip had whispered something to her before they parted ways. Just as she is about to grasp the memory completely, a knock suddenly echoes through the house. The maid immediately looks toward the entrance in confusion, wondering who could possibly be visiting at such an early hour. Even Liana appears startled since neither of them had been expecting guests. The maid informs her that someone indeed seems to be outside and states that she will go check the door. Meanwhile, Liana presses her hand harder against her temple, feeling as though she is forgetting something extremely important. Fragments of the previous night begin resurfacing in her mind one after another. Before she entered the carriage, she distinctly remembers hearing Philip's voice near her ear. In a low whisper, he had mentioned that he would come to see her the following day. Not only that, but he had also shamelessly insisted that when he arrived, she should touch him properly once again. The instant the memory fully returns, Liana's face pales. In complete panic, she abruptly jumps to her feet and hurriedly tells her maid not to open the door under any circumstances. Unfortunately, before the maid can even react, Philip's voice resounds clearly from outside. Calm and completely shameless, he announces that it is him. He further states that they still need to continue the conversation that had remained unfinished in his bedroom the previous night. According to him, there was definitely something different about the way she touched him compared to everyone else. The maid slowly turns toward Liana with an expression filled with disbelief and quietly remarks that it truly sounds as though her mistress has finally crossed a dangerous line. Naturally, Liana vehemently denies everything in utter frustration. In her mind, she insists that she did absolutely nothing wrong and that the Emperor is simply an outrageously strange man. Meanwhile, Philip's voice comes again from outside, sounding entirely unconcerned as he states that since she is obviously inside, he might as well enter himself. The moment she hears that, Liana's heart nearly stops. If Philip walks through that door right now, she is convinced she will have no way of escaping his relentless persistence. In her eyes, The man is nothing less than a perverted tyrant capable of dragging her into some absurd fantasy straight out of a bizarre novel no one has ever even heard of. Driven into desperation, she suddenly rushes toward the window and throws it open. Her maid instantly panics at the sight, shouting in alarm while asking what exactly she thinks she is doing. The maid desperately warns her that climbing out from there is dangerous and begs her to come back inside immediately. Yet Liana has already made up her mind. No matter how extreme the situation becomes, she refuses to let herself become the victim of Philip's strange fantasy. After all, she has not even experienced her first kiss yet. There is absolutely no way she intends to surrender herself to such a shameless emperor. Thankfully, the window is not positioned very high above the ground, making escape seem at least somewhat possible. Liana hurriedly grabs her maid by the shoulders before the woman can move any closer to the door. In a frantic voice, she explains that the man standing outside is none other than the emperor himself. She desperately warns the maid that if Philip enters and starts asking for her, she must absolutely pretend that Liana is not inside the house. In fact, in her panic, she goes as far as telling the maid to simply inform him that she died from alcohol poisoning during the previous night. The maid stares at her in complete disbelief, utterly unable to comprehend what kind of nonsense her mistress is saying. Before the woman can even question her further, Liana immediately leaps out through the window without hesitation. The maid can only stand there in shock, loudly questioning what in the world Liana is even talking about. At almost the exact same moment, Philip finally enters the room. Calmly stepping inside, he glances around before asking where Lady Liana is, since he had been certain she was inside moments ago. Not receiving any answer, he slowly approaches the open window and leans outward, calling for her from above. Meanwhile, hidden outside near the wall beneath the window, Liana presses herself against the building while nervously holding her breath. Internally, she sighs in relief, thinking that the situation had been far too close for comfort. Fortunately, she believes that if she simply remains hidden for a little while longer, Philip will eventually give up and leave on his own. However, just as she starts to relax slightly, she suddenly hears a small voice nearby. Instantly alarmed, she stiffens in fear and wonders if the emperor somehow managed to come down already. She clearly heard his voice above her only moments ago, so there should be no possible way for him to already be standing nearby. Turning her head cautiously, she finally notices the source of the noise. It is a small child. The little baby continues making soft sounds, seemingly unaware of the tension around her. Liana immediately becomes anxious, realizing that if the child keeps making noise, Philip might notice her hiding place. Trying to avoid attention, she quietly tells the child to go somewhere else and play. Instead of leaving, however, the baby suddenly looks directly at Liana with sparkling eyes before loudly calling out for her mother. The moment the word leaves the child's mouth, Liana nearly bursts into tears internally. In complete panic, she silently begs the baby to stop talking before anyone hears. Yet before she can focus on calming the child down, another realization suddenly strikes her. Looking closely at the little girl, Liana freezes completely. The baby looks exactly like her. From the bright blonde hair to the vivid green eyes, every feature is practically identical. The resemblance is so overwhelming that it almost feels as though someone copied and pasted her appearance onto a smaller body. Completely stunned, Liana begins wondering who this child could possibly be. As far as she knows, blonde hair and green eyes are incredibly rare. Because of that, she briefly wonders if the child might be Liana's younger sister or perhaps a niece. However, before she can think any further, another familiar voice suddenly reaches her ears. Philip appears nearby and casually remarks that she is indeed here after all. Liana immediately starts sweating nervously, unable to understand when exactly he managed to get there. Philip calmly explains that he arrived only moments ago. After entering her room and realizing she was not there, he simply came outside to search for her instead. Then his attention shifts toward the child beside her. With visible confusion, he asks who the baby is. Liana quickly replies that she has no idea because she only just met the child herself. At the same time, she points out that the girl's hair and eye color are completely identical to her own. Hearing that, Philip's expression subtly changes. After a brief pause, he carefully asks whether Liana has a child. She immediately denies it without hesitation, firmly stating that she is not even married, so there is no way she could possibly have a daughter. Although Liana only appeared briefly in the original novel, she clearly remembers that the woman was supposed to be single. Unless there was some hidden child nobody ever mentioned, this situation makes absolutely no sense. Unfortunately, before either of them can think further, the baby suddenly clings tightly to Liana and once again calls her mother. The atmosphere instantly freezes. Both Liana and Philip stare at the child in complete shock. Then, as if things were not already chaotic enough, the baby slowly turns toward Philip and innocently calls him father as well. This time, both adults become utterly speechless. A short while later, the three of them end up gathered inside the living room. Philip immediately insists that the situation is not what she thinks it is. However, Liana quickly questions whether he is truly certain about that. Philip explains that he met her for the very first time only yesterday, so logically there should be no possible way for them to already have a child together. Still, Liana argues that this does not explain why the baby keeps calling them mother and father. Philip irritably asks how he is supposed to know the answer to that himself. As he looks at the child more carefully, he cannot deny that the resemblance to Liana is undeniable. The little girl looks almost exactly like her. However, because the child was found at Liana's own residence, he cannot understand why she keeps acting as though she has never seen the baby before. At the same time, Liana herself remains deeply confused because the truth is that she genuinely does not know the child. In fact, she does not know anyone in this world at all. Watching her reactions carefully, Philip's expression gradually grows more serious. He begins wondering if her memory has become so damaged from excessive drinking that she no longer even recognizes her own child. The possibility makes him increasingly concerned about how severe her condition truly is. Still, he gently reassures her that things may not be hopeless. He explains that the former chancellor once displayed very similar symptoms, but after giving up alcohol, he recovered surprisingly quickly. Liana immediately tries to insist once again that the baby is not hers. However, before she can properly explain herself, the butler suddenly bursts into the room in panic. Breathlessly, the old man announces that the baby suddenly disappeared. After hearing reports that the child might be here, he hurried over immediately. Only then does he finally notice Philip sitting there as well. Instantly startled, the butler awkwardly coughs in embarrassment upon realizing the emperor is present. Philip calmly tells him not to worry about the unexpected intrusion before casually mentioning that it sounds as though the butler knows this child quite well. The butler apologizes and explains that he is actually the baby's designated caretaker. Hearing that, Philip directly asks who exactly the child is and whether she might truly be Liana's daughter. The butler immediately denies it without hesitation. He firmly states that Liana is unmarried, so naturally she cannot possibly have a child. Now both Liana and Philip grow even more confused and ask who the child actually is. The butler then reveals something entirely unexpected. According to him, it was Liana herself who brought the child home some time ago. The revelation leaves Liana completely stunned. She can only stare blankly ahead while wondering what kind of serious disaster the original owner of this body may have gotten herself involved in before disappearing. She asks the butler if she never told him whose child she is. He replies that no, she never mentioned it, but then bends down to the child, his voice softening as he says she's been asleep the entire time since she arrived, and they were terribly worried. He's relieved she's finally opened her eyes. Handing over the doll the baby had been holding, he adds with a gentle smile that her eyes are truly beautiful. Then he remembers something and says what a foolish old man he is. She must be hungry, and with their permission he wants to go out briefly to fetch the baby's meal. As he steps out, Liana thinks if the child was holding a dog when she was brought here, then surely she had a parent or guardian. Her gaze falls on the toy, and she notices the name Ariel written on it. She wonders, is Ariel the child's name? His Majesty takes a seat beside her and she immediately speaks up, insisting she's not the mother, that her head is perfectly clear. She adds that she doesn't even remember bringing the child along, that it wasn't intentional. But before she can say more, he interrupts her with a quiet, "I'm sorry," catching her off guard. He says it again, he's sorry. He went too far. She quietly replies that it's all right. He admits that it's just this is his first time experiencing something like this. She echoes, "Something like this?" He tries to explain when he touches her, it's different. Unlike with anyone else, his body, but before he can finish, a sudden gust of wind blows through, tugging at his clothing and exposing more of his chest. Both she and the baby stare with wide eyes. The baby, however, keeps staring a moment too long, then lets out a loud scream. Liana says she was fine earlier, so why is she crying now? She then requests the emperor to fasten his clothes first. Once he fixes his buttons, he glances at the child and asks if she is a little calmer now. She replies no. She seems more startled than she expected. She cries out to His Majesty, panicked, asking what they should do. In the heat of the moment, she grabs his hand and pleads with him to try something. Philip calls her name, his voice uncertain, and says he's not sure if this is the right time to mention it. but he wasn't imagining things. When she touches him, his body heats up. But before he can say more, she quickly presses her hand to his lips, cutting him off by saying this really isn't the time to be saying that. A second later, she jerks her hand back, startled by her own action. She hadn't even realized she'd reached out. Even if the baby is crying, can she really just touch the Emperor's face like that? But to her shock, he ends up smiling. Both she and the baby look at him with soft eyes before the baby mumbles "Dada" again. She smiles. Clearly His Majesty's face has some kind of calming effect. At her urging, he awkwardly starts playing peekaboo and the baby lets out a delighted grin. She glances at the baby, a little baffled. How does she smile at that? Does she like handsome faces? His Majesty asks, is he handsome? She answers casually, oh yes, objectively speaking. A flush creeps across his cheeks, but before anything else, the baby suddenly reaches out and touches his face. He suddenly recoils. Her expression shifts in an instant as she asks if he's alright. She remembers he's supposed to be someone who absolutely hates physical contact. In a rush, she says she doesn't know any better. She's just a baby, so don't be angry, but then she notices something unsettling. He's not angry. He somehow looks scared. She grows more alarmed when she sees his body trembling with cold. She immediately grabs hold of him and tells him to stay with her, reminding him that he once said her touch warms him. Is it helping? He pulls her into his arms without warning, whispering just a bit more. She blurts out what exactly is going on. He admits it is because of a curse. If he touches anyone other than her, his body freezes. She is the first person he ever touched who didn't cause him to freeze. She asks when he said his body heats up when she touches him, this is what he meant. He questions what on earth was she thinking. Leaning in closer, he softly says it has been quite a long time since his body became one that could not feel the warmth of another. He acknowledges his actions must be flustering for her and he's sorry for that, but it seems that she is the only one who can free him from this curse. Blushing, she whispers only her, why? He starts to say, that is because, but they're both cut off when the baby ducks behind her toy. His Majesty watches her for a moment before realizing she's trying to hand it to him. Liana gives a small smile and tells him he should probably take it. He hesitates, glancing at his gloved hand, then crouches down and takes the toy. The baby mumbles something incoherent, but somehow, His Majesty senses she's trying to apologize. He asks her why is she apologizing to him. She looks guilty. Liana realizes she is apologizing because she thinks she hurt Philip when she touched him. Philip tells her it is not her fault. She must have been very surprised because of him. He is sorry. He attempts a smile and tells the baby he is all better now. He's really okay. Liana picks her up with a smile. Just then, the butler returns, apologizing for the delay. He was preparing the baby's meal along with a few snacks. But when he sees them together, looking like a family, he mutters how tactless of him and says he will see himself out and asks them to let him know if they need anything. Before she can stop him, he's already out the door, leaving her to wonder what just happened. She then turns to His Majesty and asks how did he end up like this. He asks like what? She clarifies she meant that curse. He points at his chest and explains there is a shard of ice embedded in his heart. When he touches another person, it begins to run rampant. Surprised, she asks how did that get in there? He casually says he planted it there himself, making her blurt out a what. He explains when his body starts to freeze, nothing can melt it, so there was nothing he could do but wait for the rampage to stop. But perhaps because the Daphne family wields the power of fire, when he touches her, not only does the rampage stop but his body temperature also rises quickly. At this rate, he might even be able to melt this wretched shard of ice. But she blurts out, wait a moment. Could it be that he's mistaken about something? Special powers exist in this world. Fire, ice, and wind. The power to wield such elements. Among them, only Philip could use ice. Fire could only be used by those who inherited the blood of the Daphne family. However, as far as she remembers, Liana couldn't use the power of fire at all. She confesses she doesn't have the ability to control the power of fire. In the original novel, the female lead, Alicia, manifested the most powerful fire ability in the Empire's history. Because of this setup, Liana was portrayed as a villain consumed by an inferiority complex. His Majesty says impossible to be able to suppress his powers. Her ability must be far beyond ordinary, but she insists she cannot even make smoke alone control fire. If anything, Alicia should be the one with the power. But to her shock, he simply takes off his glove and touches the baby's cheek. She freaks out, screaming if he's crazy, what does he think he's doing, trying to freeze to death? He calmly points out that since she's holding him, it's melting quite well. Panicked, she yells that he could have just told her, Why would he show her in such a dangerous way? He counters that there's nothing more accurate than seeing it with her own eyes. He calls out her name and gently pulls her to him, saying it seems he has found the cure to this damned curse. That night, she watches the baby sleeping, the pendant around her neck catching the faint light. His Majesty gave it to her, but her being a cure, does that even make sense? She recalls his earlier words, it seems he has found the cure to this damned curse. She had been so stunned, all she could manage was a simple congratulation. He went on to explain that he meant her. She appeared to be the cure. The shock had left her speechless, and he asked if she would help melt the ice in his heart. She had hesitated, saying she had no intention of being anyone's cure. Still, he handed her the pendant and told her to think about it. She's already overwhelmed with her own situation. How could she possibly have the mind to be some cure? But she cannot also ignore someone who looked so desperate. Annoyed, she mutters he's supposed to be a tyrant, but what kind of tyrant is, so she trails off, recalling that Philip in the book she read was definitely a savage tyrant. But seeing him in person, even though he looks cold, he didn't feel like a tyrant. Is it because the story hasn't truly begun yet? Then again, Philip only reveals his tyrannical side around the middle of the story after Liana disappears from it. She figures at this point in life, while Liana still exists, Philip might be a little different. Besides, she never knew the Emperor had a secret like this, to think his body freezes when he touches someone. Could that be the reason why he hated physical contact so much? In the book he was just a bad-tempered emperor, but the reason for it was never mentioned. The only thing mentioned was that his mother, the former empress, died because his powers were rampant when he was just a child. He never used his powers again. That was all. But why is she so bothered by Philip's past, which she has only read about? It has nothing to do with her. Has she grown attached to him already? She tries to convince herself this is all because he is so unnecessarily handsome. Someone remarks she has said that before, it seems she is quite fond of his face. She explains it is true that he is very handsome, but then pauses, eyes wide. He sits before her and asks if she will be his cure now. She asks why is he suddenly appearing out of thin air. But when the child mumbles in her sleep, she lowers her voice into a whisper and asks why did he appear out of nowhere. He says didn't he tell her there is a communication spell on the necklace he gave her. She replies he never said that. He smiles and says then he's saying it now, it has a communication spell. For her information, there's also a teleportation spell, so she can come to him by pressing the button on the back of the pendant. She remarks really, that such a small necklace has that kind of function. He then asks if she has had a change of heart. About what? She asks. He replies about becoming his cure. Is she willing to become his cure now? She replies unfortunately, her answer is the same as before, no. He drops his gaze and says he's disappointed. She asks what is he disappointed about. He reminds her when she came into his room before, she said she would do anything if he just lets her touch him just once. And now that she got what she wanted, she acts like she doesn't even know him. He even gave him her whole body. Flustered, she calls out his title, warning that people will seriously get the wrong idea if they hear something like that. He bursts into laughter, clearly amused. But then, without missing a beat, he tells her there's a banquet tomorrow night and asks if she's interested in attending. She gives him a flat no. Why would she go there? He mumbles that's a shame. If she comes to the banquet tomorrow, he was going to try seducing her with this face she seems to like. Since she won't be his cure, he guesses he will have to try harder to win her heart. He asks again, so is he really not coming tomorrow? Flustered, she stumbles for a reply before snapping back to her senses and yelling that she's not going ever. The next day she stands there clueless. She definitely wasn't going to come. So how did she end up in that fancy dress standing in the hall? Since she's here, she decides to stay quietly in a corner and leave, blaming it all on that face. That face keeps popping into her head. She picks up the drink, thinking standing around like this feels awkward and her throat is a little dry anyway. Just a sip to wet her lips. But she freezes when a girl nearby comments that the Duke still looks as dashing as ever. Before she can react, the girl suddenly spins around, making her drink spill slightly. She acts like she didn't know Liana was there and says she should have at least made her presence known. She was so unusually quiet she didn't even realize she was here. Liana thinks she got her glove wet and doesn't even apologize. The girl then whispers in her friend's ear, now that she thinks about it, didn't she almost become a noble lady? Her friend replies she did, and yet she came today even though no one welcomes her. They bet she's just trying to make some kind of connection with His Majesty, and the Duke of Harrington, her uncle, doesn't care about her at all anyway. She spots Duke Harrington among the crowd. He is the father of Alicia, the protagonist of this novel. As soon as his daughter awakened the power of fire, he pushed out Liana's father, who was the heir and took the dukedom. He was that ambitious. Even after becoming duke, he kept rising by pushing his daughter forward. In this world where a few abilities users hold absolute power and are reverent, her power backed by the fire ability at times held more influence than even the emperor. Of course, Philip of the imperial family also has an ability, but since there were only rumors of its awakening and no one had ever seen him use it, the outcome was obvious. On top of that, with Philip away at war, Alicia had been appointed as a future empress and the duke's power was about to grow even more. She thinks it has nothing to do with her and flatly says to the she is still here. Holding out the drink, she asks, "Want some?" The girl says she heard from her father that His Majesty will soon choose a partner for a royal marriage. Surely she's not interested too, is she? But Liana just takes a sip, figuring if the girl doesn't want it, she might as well. Still, the silence is clearly misread. Her friend blurts out, "She is not thinking of it, right? That position belongs to Lady Alicia. And to stop bothering her already." She sets the glass down and asks evenly, "Has she been bothering Lady Alicia?" Her friend shoots back, "Hasn't she? She always looked after her since they were cousins." Liana calmly asks her, "Has she seen it herself?" She asks what? Liana replies, "Her bothering her?" She was wondering if she had seen it with her own eyes. She has no response for that, but she only wanted to ask how much of a menace Liana was in the novel. Turns out this part of her is the same in and out of the story. But then she spots His Majesty watching her from across the crowd. She wonders what's with that look. Then she realizes he's noticed the empty glasses beside her. She glances at them too. As she walks down the hallway, she mutters to herself, how sharp is his eyesight anyway? With that many people in the room, how did he spot her so quickly? She herself doesn't understand why she always finds herself holding a glass when she snaps back to her senses. Even without Liana's memories, do her old habits still linger in this body? She catches faint whispers and stops in her tracks. It takes her a second to realize they are talking about His Majesty. The Duke remarks if they leave things as they are, he will end up joining the war he was planning to fight, so they should keep His Majesty in place until he can shift the course. The other man asks, is that possible? He's saying all they need is contact with him. The Duke smirks and says who knows, they will find out when they try. He is sure the Emperor has a weakness when it comes to physical contact. He doesn't know exactly what it is though. They assume it could be related to the late Empress's death. That is possible. Maybe he believed his touch killed his mother and that is why he has this issue. The Duke catches sight of something, then swiftly brushes it off, telling the man it's nothing and that he may go for now. But he adds that His Majesty must remain occupied during the designated time, and if possible, the man should dig up whatever weakness the Emperor has been hiding so carefully. Hidden in the shadows, she trembles, mind screaming to run, but her body refuses to move. Before she can react, the Duke seizes her harshly, tightening his grip around her throat. He reminds her that he told her to stay quietly locked up in the house. So why is she out here, eavesdropping? She struggles, gasping for air, and then he shoves her to the floor with a disgusted sneer. He accuses her of drinking again, says the stench is unbearable. Then, with a sudden shift in tone, he demands to know if she's taking care of the child properly. Her mind reels. Child? She echoes in confusion. He scoffs, claiming she's so drunk she can't even recall what's happened lately. Who else would he be talking about? Elisha's child, the one he left in her care. The words hit like a blow, and she goes still, stunned into silence. She ponders there was nothing in the novel about Alicia having a child, and if he talking about the child she is currently taking care of, it must be Ariel. A shudder runs through her at the thought of Ariel being Elisha's daughter. He tells her to make sure Alicia never finds out about that child's existence. When the time comes she'll take her. He tells her Ariel or whatever, and if she is useless too he can just get rid of her right away. He steps away while she sweats in fear, thinking what is it with that guy? She wonders if he is really related to the female lead. She is really questioning how can someone grab another by the collar the moment they see them. She then realizes about Philip, thinking that she heard the Duke plotting something earlier. She knows she can't let Philip get involved with that man. She ponders if Enoch's outburst becomes known in a public place like this it'll be dangerous. She suddenly calls out to Philip loudly. He notices her as well as the crowd. She thinks it's good that she managed to draw their attention successfully, but still she didn't mean to call out that loudly. A woman whispers if Liana is trying to pull something on His Majesty again. Regardless of the reason, yelling like that is just so undignified. She was trying to stop Philip from losing control at the banquet. She steps towards him asking if she may hold his hand for a moment. He is a bit surprised, but she takes off his glove and holds his hand. Everyone starts questioning if she has totally gone mad, seeing how His Majesty is really holding hands with someone. Philip asks Liana why is she suddenly acting like this. He asks her if she has been drinking again. He's thankful it's his hand and not his chest she is touching, but still she tells him that's not the case. She steps near and whispers into his ears that she overheard it earlier on the balcony. The Duke of Harrington was plotting something. He states no wonder things seem so quiet lately. She tells him if they're holding hands like this he won't lose control, right? He tells her that is right. She tells him to hold onto her tightly then and stay hidden behind her. He is startled as she asks him what if someone other than him tries to harm His Majesty. He asks her if she is telling him to hide behind her. He stays silent for a while as she tells him it's not the time to be hesitating. She promises that she'll make sure no one lays a hand on His Majesty. He calls out her name before looking away and asking if he can really be protected by her. She asks him how will he go to the war like this. He questions can he go? She responds of course not. What if he loses control on the battlefield, realizing that would be a disaster? The Duke of Harrington greets His Majesty. He mentions it's an honor to be a part of today's banquet. He questions if he may know why is His Majesty with the Lady of the Marquis. Philip looks at Liana, who begins to tremble. Philip tells Liana that he will speak with the Duke alone. He asks her if she would go and enjoy the banquet for a little while. He whispers to her that he'll return soon so she can continue protecting him. The Duke notices them being so close and wonders what is going on between the two. Liana sits outside and sips her drink. She remembers she said she'd protect him and yet she was trembling in front of the Duke. She realizes he must have heard everything. She wonders why does her body never listen when she is in front of Duke Harrington. She ponders that still His Majesty will talk things through with him properly, right? She notices him outside and calls out to him. He steps towards her and tells her it's cold, asking why is she outside. She responds that she just didn't feel like being inside. She ponders that there's no way she is going to say she was overwhelmed by the attention after putting out a fire. She asks him how did the talk to. Philip tells her that Duke Harrington will be taking part in the Hassan fire. She finds it a relief. He covers her warmly and mentions that the Duke didn't seem to care if he lost control or not and he didn't expect her to help him like this. She tells him that she didn't mean to look like she didn't care. She feels warm. He questions didn't she say she would be some kind of cure for him? She responds that is true. He gets down on his knees and fixes the cloth to cover her properly. He asks her how much did she drink this time. She tells him she didn't drink much and just took a sip. She then comes clean and tells him it was a glass. He looks at her, making her tell him maybe it was 2 or 3. He asks her if she has already forgotten what the doctor said about drinking. She tells him there's no way she forgot it, she was just tasting it. He asks her to head over to the carriage and that he'll join her soon. He needs to wrap up a few things in the banquet. She tells him it's alright and she can go back by herself. She loses control, making him question how exactly is she planning to go on her own in that state. She tells him that she really can just walk. He mentions that he'll assign a knight to escort her to the carriage. She tells him all right and ponders now that she is relaxing. The alcohol is hitting her all at once. She knows she's walking straight just fine, so why is the road keep twisting? She finds it so weird, stating that she isn't even drunk. She falls to the ground while the knight panics and asks her if she is all right. She tells him that she thinks she is okay. She ponders that she is okay aside from the fact that she is dying of embarrassment. Still, thanks to that, she has sobered up a little. She asks the knight if he could wait for her over there at the corner for a moment. She thinks that she needs to adjust her skirt a little. She looks at her wound, knowing it's all scraped up. She mentions that alcohol really is the enemy. Someone yells idiot. She looks behind to find the Duke scolding someone. He yells at the man, stating he couldn't even handle that one thing properly and now he has to go to war because of him. The man apologizes to him, mentioning that he is terribly sorry, and states that the lady from the Marquis suddenly interrupted. The Duke asks him if he doesn't realize how critical this moment is. The Duke tells him that they must hasten the imperial marriage between His Majesty and Alicia as soon as possible. The Duke asks of all times why must he be away during the preparations for Alicia and His Majesty's royal wedding? Even if the Duke is absent, they will ensure everything proceeds smoothly. Liana notices it's the Duke again. She wonders why is the female lead's father so twisted. The Duke tells the man to make sure Alicia doesn't get distracted until that person arrives. He responds of course he will. The Duke is relieved that at least there is still time before the deployment. He finds it a relief. Liana ponders it's better to avoid him before they run into each other again. She tries to step away before he catches her. He yells at her, asking if eavesdropping like a little rat has become a habit to her. She turns to tell him that she wasn't overhearing anything. She ponders that she has to get back to the knight quickly. The Duke steps towards her while she tells him that she just fell because she was drunk. The Duke slaps her, leaving her totally unresponsive. He asks her where does she think she is running off to. He questions if she is running off to snitch to the Emperor again. He calls her an ungrateful wretch. He pulls her hair, stating after all the care he has given her, is she trying to ruin his name now? He tells her that as usual she should have stayed quiet like a doll. Why must she always cause trouble at every banquet? She moans in pain. He then mentions that judging by her state she really did catch the Emperor's attention. He asks her if she thinks getting close to the Emperor will change anything. He mocks her, asking if she thinks that somehow gives her room to breathe. She wonders what is that supposed to mean. In the original story, Liana didn't approach Philip to become Empress, but rather it was because she wanted to live. She wonders if Liana had a terminal illness set up or something. She knows she seems healthy enough, seeing as she is still conscious even after being hit like this. The Duke, after noticing her unresponsive behavior, becomes shocked and raises her hand, asking if she is ignoring him just now. She tells him that's not the case. She closes her eyes in fear, knowing he's going to hit her again. Suddenly someone yells, "What the hell is this?" The Duke looks ahead to find His Majesty standing. His Majesty states that he believes he asked, "What is the Duke doing right now?" The Duke smiles and mentions that he heard his child caused a disturbance at the banquet. As the family elder, he was merely scolding her briefly. His Majesty mentions that strictly speaking the Duke is from House Harrington, and that doesn't make him the head of the house. He grabs into Liana while stating that there is hardly anything on that small body worth laying a hand on. The Duke mentions that those injuries were caused when she fell down on her own and not by him, stating that he sincerely scolded her just with words. Liana realizes that's how he is playing it, seeing how he is lying so shamelessly. Liana grits her teeth, thinking after beating her like this, does he think she'll let him off easily? Liana calls out to His Majesty. He notices her face, seeing that her lips are bleeding. Liana tells His Majesty that the Duke really did hit her. The Duke questions her, how dare she lie before His Majesty? Liana looks at the Duke, asking who's the one lying now. Liana asks what does he mean by lying, stating that he hit her one-sidedly. He hit her so hard her teeth feel like they're shaking. His Majesty mentions that the Duke always goes on about how fond he is of his niece, but his way of showing affection seems rather twisted. The Duke blurts out to let him explain, while expressing that it's not true. He adds, furthermore, didn't he take control over House Daphne's entire estate, and now His Majesty will strip him off his title just because he disciplined her a little? Liana ponders, so the Duke controlled everything, which means Liana had nothing to her name. In the novel he was portrayed as an arrogant person, but here just meeting Duke Harrington's gaze turns her to stone in fear, and on top of that she had to give up all her inheritance. She is aware that she didn't even read the novel that carefully. She realizes both Philip and Liana don't at all match the way she remembers them. She wonders what on earth happened. His Majesty states if that is what the Duke calls protection, then perhaps the Duke's authority should be revoked. The Duke becomes worried, stating that cannot be the case. It was him, Ralph Harrington, who protected House Daphne these past 20 years, and now His Majesty is deciding to strip him of his title just for disciplining her a little? Liana is taken aback by the way he is reacting. His Majesty questions if that is discipline, then why is he so angry? His Majesty continues that if he remembers correctly, the Duke's guardianship over House Daphne was only supposed to last until the young heir came of age. He was supposed to return everything long ago, yet he delayed it by years, and now raising his voice just makes it seem like he is after his niece's fortune. The Duke responds that his estate is far greater, so why would he covet something so trivial? He simply continued managing House Daphne because Liana asked him to. His Majesty asks Liana if that is true. She responds that it doesn't seem to be the case. She knows that she doesn't know what the real Liana was like, but she isn't her. His Majesty then states that the young Marchioness doesn't appear to want the Duke's protection, so from this moment on the full authority of House Daphne shall return to its rightful heir, the young Marchioness. The Duke becomes totally shocked, while Philip continues now that he is on the topic they should discuss about today's violence as well. His Majesty asks Liana if there is a particular punishment she would like for the Duke. She wonders if she really is allowed to decide something like this. She thinks about it. She realizes that earlier the Duke did say there is still time before the deployment. She tells His Majesty to send the Duke and the man behind him to the battlefield today, right at this moment. Later, as Philip tends to her wounds, she pleads with him to be gentle, saying it hurts. He tells her to stop exaggerating, though his voice darkens as he wonders aloud whether the punishment given to the Duke is truly sufficient. She insists that sending the Duke to the battlefield should be enough, but is it really okay to deal with him like that? Philip admits there's a procedure for such matters, though he's not the one who's meant to follow it. Still, he says, despite it being a headache, if the Duke were to die on the battlefield, he supposes it wouldn't really matter. In any case, he assures her, she doesn't need to worry about it. She glances at him, uneasy, wondering how he can speak so calmly about something so serious. He then begins to wrap her hand in bandages. She hesitates before asking if there's something he wanted to say. He replies that he didn't mean to overhear but what the Duke said earlier about getting close to him being her only breathing room. Can he ask what that meant? She realizes then that it had bothered him more than he let on. He finally asks her if that hadn't been the first time the Duke treated her harshly. She admits she doesn't know either. However, whenever she sees the Duke, her body suddenly stiffens and she cannot speak properly. Judging by that, it seems they were not on very good terms. She smiles sheepishly and reminds him her memory has quite a few gaps, so she is afraid she cannot give him a clear answer. But then she quickly adds not to misunderstand. It is not that she cannot remember because of the alcohol. He sighs before looking up and asking her if she needs him. Shall he stay by her side? She mumbles so in return she can be his cure. He says only if she's willing. First, she wants to know what exactly does this treatment entail? He doesn't know the specifics either. He can only surmise that the power of fire she possesses might be able to melt the shard of ice in his heart. She argues what if she can't? Then perhaps it will at least prevent his brain from freezing over. He adds with a smile at this rate, he fears both his brain and heart will eventually freeze completely. She can't help but think, why on earth is he smiling? This is a serious situation. She quietly asks why does it have to be her? If he needs the power of fire, wouldn't Alicia be a better choice than her? But he claims Alicia she will not do. At her confusion, he admits he has tried making contact with the lady but it triggered a rampage all the same. It is only her, the only one whose hand he can hold, the only one from whom he can feel warmth. His eyes lift to hers, full of longing, as he murmurs she is the only one for him. She finally says she will do it, catching him off guard, but then he composes himself and thanks her, telling her to use him whenever she needs, but she says how can she dare? It's not like she's doing it expecting anything in return. He asks why the sudden change of heart, and she simply smiles, saying there's no real reason. She'd said she wouldn't, but the thought kept weighing on her, or maybe her true feelings slipped out because of the alcohol. Then, almost absently, she mentions she's figured out whose child Ariel is, but her words trail off as a wave of sleepiness hits her, making her wonder if it's the alcohol again. She manages to mumble that Ariel is Alicia's child but adds that Alicia doesn't seem to know of the child's existence, so she's unsure whether she should tell her. Philip gently places a hand on her forehead, assuring her he understands but tells her to rest for now, he can hear the rest in the morning. She tries to argue that there's still more to say, but then maybe she can sleep for 5 minutes. Later she will ask what her role as the cure will be from now on, to decide what to do about Ariel, to thank him properly for saving her earlier. With those thoughts she drifts off to sleep. Philip remains by her side, quietly stunned, wondering what on earth he's doing standing there like that. No matter how much Liana is the only one who can melt the ice in his heart, even he doesn't understand why he's going this far. Losing his temper with a Duke he wouldn't normally even pay attention to. He decides if she's going to sleep, he should at least move her somewhere more comfortable. As he lifts her, he's startled by how light she is, and he can't help but wonder, how could anyone bring themselves to hurt someone so delicate? The point where her cheek and lip were split and her capillaries burst. He gently lays her on the bed and grabs his head in frustration. He should probably call someone to get an ice pack before her swelling worsens, but instead he decides to leave quietly before she wakes. That's when he finds Ariel standing in the room. Without hesitation, she tells him to lie down. He blinks, surprised. He is sure she couldn't even speak properly when he saw her a few days ago. Again, she insists he lie down. He forces a smile, asking if she wants to play, but tells her he has to leave. It's time for her to be asleep, too. Moments later, however, he finds himself lying next to them, wondering how this even happened. He steals a glance at the two sleeping peacefully beside him. He hadn't planned to stay, but Ariel delayed him. Still, there's no way he can sleep now, but then Liana shifts in her sleep and suddenly curls into his arms. His heartbeat races. His mind is a mess as it is, so why is this damn heart, which never usually stirs, suddenly going wild? Is it because the ice is melting because he touched her? And if it's already this loud now, how much worse will it get once it melts completely? It would be a problem if it grew any more calamitous than this. Perhaps not completely, but moderately melted should be enough. Poor Philip is unable to sleep properly. He has never once laid beside another person in the same bed before, and the unfamiliar situation keeps his mind restless throughout the night. As he lies there quietly, he notices that Liana's cheek has swollen even more than before. The redness spreading across her skin makes him uneasy. He He carefully considers moving away to call for the servants, but he immediately realizes that she would most likely wake up if he shifted even slightly. The bell used to summon the servants is far beyond his reach, leaving him with no easy solution. He knows that her swollen cheek needs to be cooled before it becomes worse, yet another problem soon appears in his mind. He wonders how he is supposed to bring ice without leaving the bed. After hesitating for a long moment, he begins to think that perhaps the power hidden inside him could help instead. However, that thought alone fills him with discomfort. Ever since his mother passed away after being swept away by his uncontrollable power when he was only 7 years old, Philip has been terrified of using that ability again. More than a decade has passed since then, and he has avoided relying on it no matter the circumstance. Yet now, for the sake of reducing the swelling on Liana's small face, he considers using it once more. If the elders ever learned that he had awakened that power again merely to soothe someone's injury, they would undoubtedly be shocked beyond belief. Even so, he quietly convinces himself that this situation is different. Surely Liana would not disappear like his mother did. Carefully and cautiously, he allows the cold power to gather around his hand before pressing it gently against her swollen cheek. To his surprise, instead of recoiling, Liana softly murmurs that it feels really nice. In her sleepy state, she unconsciously grabs his hand and holds onto it tightly. That single action makes Philip smile without realizing it. As he watches her peaceful expression, he finds himself thinking that Liana truly looks the most beautiful whenever she smiles. The realization catches him completely off guard. He suddenly becomes aware of the expression on his own face and internally questions whether he actually just laughed. If anyone were to witness him acting like this, they would surely believe he had completely lost his mind. Eventually, after remaining awake for so long, he decides that he should try to sleep as well. Soon, morning arrives. Liana finally begins to wake up. At first, she feels unusually refreshed, far more refreshed than someone who merely took a 5-minute nap. Because of the darkness surrounding her, she initially assumes that it is still nighttime and briefly considers falling asleep again. However, something quickly feels strange to her. The pillow beneath her head feels unexpectedly firm and warm. Confused, she slowly lifts her gaze and realizes that the pillow is actually Philip himself. The moment she notices him, Philip calmly asks whether she slept well. His words instantly shock her awake. He then politely tells her that if she is fully awake now, she should probably get up because his arm has started going numb after being trapped beneath her for so long. Liana immediately springs upward in complete panic. Her mind spirals into confusion as she demands to know why he is there beside her in the first place. Philip quickly notices the misunderstanding forming in her head and immediately explains that things are not what she is imagining. Embarrassed, Liana hurriedly denies imagining anything at all, but then another horrifying possibility suddenly strikes her. She nervously wonders whether she once again threw herself at him while drunk. Philip reassures her that she did absolutely nothing inappropriate. According to him, she simply slept extremely soundly throughout the night. Still unconvinced, Liana anxiously questions whether she at least grabbed onto him or behaved shamelessly in her sleep once again. Philip calmly answers that she did not do anything like that either. Hearing this finally allows her to relax. She lets out a breath of relief and admits that she genuinely thought she had committed another terrible mistake because of alcohol. Philip then asks about her face. Only then does Liana suddenly remember her swollen cheek. She fully expects it to still be painfully swollen, but when she touches her face in surprise, she realizes that the swelling has almost completely disappeared. At that moment, Philip gently reaches toward her and asks whether it still hurts. To his relief, she tells him that it feels completely fine now. Hearing that makes Philip quietly state that it is a relief. Afterward, Liana sincerely thanks him for helping her the previous day. She admits that she had been so completely out of her senses that she never properly thanked him before. Philip simply responds that her split lips and the burst capillaries still require proper treatment. Before their conversation can continue further, Ariel's cheerful voice suddenly calls out toward them. Liana immediately turns in confusion, only now realizing that Ariel slept in the room as well. She had completely assumed that the butler had already taken Ariel back to her own room for the night. Ariel then happily calls out to both of them, referring to them affectionately as her mother and father. Liana says that she is truly glad that Ariel seems to like her so much. However, while looking closely at the little girl, she suddenly notices something strange. Her expression immediately changes, causing Philip to question what is wrong. Liana carefully stares at Ariel before pointing out that it somehow feels as though Ariel has grown bigger overnight. Philip looks toward the child as well and soon realizes that she might actually be right. Ariel truly does appear slightly larger than she did the previous day. At the same time, Philip also notices another unusual detail. Ariel now seems capable of speaking a few proper words, which confuses him even further. Since she can talk now, he wonders why she still insists on calling Liana mother instead of using her actual name. Liana casually replies that it is probably because her name is difficult for Ariel to pronounce properly. She explains that Ariel also keeps calling Philip dad, so perhaps complicated names are simply still too difficult for her. Wanting to test the theory, Liana gently asks Ariel to repeat her name after her. However, despite trying, Ariel still seems unable to pronounce it correctly. Meanwhile, Philip quietly observes the situation with growing suspicion. Something about all of this feels slightly unnatural to him, though he cannot immediately explain why. Completely unaware of his thoughts, Liana simply finds Ariel unbearably adorable. She happily comments on how cute the child is, which only makes Philip's serious expression appear even stranger in comparison. Liana cannot help but wonder why he is staring at Ariel with such an odd and complicated look on his face. Philip then carefully reaches toward Ariel, questioning whether she might be feeling hot because something about her behavior seems unusual. However, the moment his hand approaches her, Ariel instantly turns her face away and avoids his touch entirely. That reaction catches Philip off guard. For a brief moment, he wonders whether Ariel deliberately dodged him. Before he can think further about it, Liana suddenly hears a strange noise nearby. Philip quickly realizes that the sound is coming from the communication necklace he is wearing. The next moment, a loud voice practically shouts through it, aggressively demanding to know where Philip had been the previous night. However, the Chancellor suddenly notices that Liana is there as well. His tone immediately changes into complete shock as he questions whether His Majesty truly spent the entire night at Lady Liana's residence. Even then, the Chancellor quickly decides that this is not the most important issue at the moment. He urgently turns his attention back toward Philip and demands to know what exactly he has been doing. Philip calmly explains that Liana's mouth had been swollen badly enough that she could barely eat properly the previous night. Liana quickly insists that she is completely fine now, though even she realizes that this probably is not the right timing for such a conversation. At that exact moment, another voice suddenly joins the communication. Someone urgently asks Philip whether the rumors are true and whether he truly laid hands on Duke Harrington. Philip calmly answers that it was not exactly a matter of laying hands on the Duke. According to him, he merely took something away from the man before sending him elsewhere. The explanation only leaves the others even more confused. One of them points out that Philip normally does not care about whatever Duke Harrington does, so they cannot understand why he suddenly involved himself this time. Ignoring further questions, Philip firmly orders everyone to return to the castle immediately. Then, after ending the discussion, he turns toward Liana and tells her that she must come with him as well. Liana enters the room just as Philip has changed into a fresh set of clothes. She cannot help but feel awkward remembering everything that has happened since morning. With a troubled expression, she apologetically points out that, of all possible moments, Ariel somehow managed to spill milk all over His Majesty right before they were supposed to leave. As she thinks about it more carefully, guilt begins to settle in her heart once again. She quietly admits that she feels as though she has done nothing but cause him trouble ever since they met. Philip, however, calmly replies that she has not caused him any inconvenience at all. According to him, every action he took was entirely by his own choice, and none of it was troublesome enough to matter. Even after hearing that, Liana still tries to say something else, but before she can continue, she notices Ariel sitting nearby with a noticeable pout on her face. Moments later, Ariel suddenly begins crawling across the floor. The sight instantly alarms Liana. She hurriedly warns that crawling around like that is dangerous for her. However, Ariel continues moving stubbornly without listening. At that moment, Philip walks closer and questions what exactly is happening. Liana explains that Ariel must simply be bored and probably needs a little attention to calm down. At the same time, she nervously keeps her eyes on the child because she is worried that someone might accidentally step on Ariel's tiny hands while moving around the room. Suddenly, while trying to avoid Ariel, Liana instinctively pushes herself backward. That single movement causes the nearby clothing board to lose balance and topple directly toward Philip. Everything happens in an instant. Fortunately, Philip reacts quickly enough to dodge the falling board before it can strike him properly. Alarmed, Liana immediately asks whether he is all right. However, the moment she looks up at him, her thoughts completely freeze. Because Philip had been in the middle of changing clothes, his chest is still partially exposed. Before either of them can regain balance, the two of them stumble together and collapse onto the floor in an awkward position, with their bodies pressed closely against one another. Meanwhile, Ariel quietly watches the entire scene unfold before her eyes. Liana's face burns with embarrassment as she hurriedly asks once again whether Philip is all right. Philip calmly replies that perhaps he is not completely fine after all because something feels like it may have been injured during the fall. The moment she hears that, panic immediately fills Liana's mind. Internally, she begins spiraling into complete horror as she wonders what she is supposed to do now. In her mind, she has somehow managed to injure the Emperor's body itself. To her, that sounds like a crime severe enough to deserve execution at worst, or exile at the very least. Yet despite her panic, another thought unexpectedly forces its way into her mind. Ever since the moment they collided, she has become painfully aware of just how incredible Philip's physique truly is. Liana's thoughts spiral in complete disarray. Even amid the chaos, she cannot help but notice from the very beginning that Philip possesses an unbelievably perfect physique. It makes perfect sense to her now why he is the male lead of an adult novel. His mere existence feels unfairly attractive. Yet the realization only makes her more horrified at herself, and she immediately scolds her own thoughts, wondering what on earth she is even thinking about at a moment like this. Philip, meanwhile, stares at her with visible confusion and asks what exactly she is doing. Flustered beyond reason, Liana hurriedly tells him to put his clothes on properly and questions what kind of shameless behavior he thinks this is. Her sudden outrage leaves him utterly baffled, and he explains that he merely tripped while trying to change his clothes. Liana refuses to calm down. She insists that he cannot simply strip anywhere he pleases and ask her to touch him as though it is normal behavior. Philip can only stare at her in disbelief, unable to understand how he somehow ended up being scolded out of nowhere. After watching her reaction carefully for a moment, he quietly questions what exactly has been going through her mind. The question alone is enough to make her face burn bright red. She quickly denies thinking anything inappropriate at all and insists that she is not the kind of person who overthinks things. Philip only smirks slightly and points out that if that is true, then perhaps she should explain why she keeps staring at his chest. Embarrassed beyond measure, Liana immediately turns her head away and stubbornly claims that she is not staring at him at all. According to her, she had merely been looking at the floor. Yet even while denying it, her eyes drift back toward his chest when she notices something unusual there. Curious, she reaches out and touches the strange glowing pattern near his heart, murmuring that it looks fascinating and asking whether he would mind opening his shirt a little more. Philip cannot help but point out the contradiction, reminding her that she had been demanding he cover himself only moments ago. Ignoring his comment completely, Liana pulls his shirt open further anyway, explaining that she cannot see the mark properly otherwise. As her fingers brush against the glowing pattern, she suddenly notices something strange. The light weakens every time her hand touches it. Philip sighs and tells her that he will stop teasing her now, so perhaps she should remove her hands already. Liana, however, remains completely absorbed in the phenomenon. She explains excitedly that the pattern dims whenever she touches it and brightens again the moment she pulls away. Grinding his teeth slightly, Philip finally explains that it likely happens because contact with her dilutes his power, causing the pattern itself to weaken. Liana stares at the mark with fascination, genuinely amazed by the explanation. She eagerly asks if she can touch it just one more time to observe it again, but Philip immediately refuses without hesitation. Disappointed, Liana inwardly laments that she only wanted to examine it a little longer. Still, something else quickly catches her attention. Philip continues sitting awkwardly without moving despite claiming earlier that he would stand up. Confused, she wonders why he keeps covering his lower body with his clothes instead of simply getting up already. Concerned, she asks if he perhaps injured himself when they fell. Thinking that he might genuinely be hurt, she offers to help him stand. Philip looks as though he wishes the ground would swallow him whole and hurriedly insists that it is not that. Before the awkward situation can grow any worse, loud voices suddenly echo from outside the room. Someone can be heard desperately trying to stop a woman from barging inside, while the woman herself angrily orders the butler to let her through. Both Liana and Philip turn toward the entrance just as the door bursts open. Alicia storms into the room and immediately demands to know what exactly the two of them are doing. Not long afterward, the atmosphere shifts into an unbearably tense silence as the three of them sit together with untouched tea placed before them. Liana feels increasingly uneasy and thinks that perhaps she should explain Ariel's existence first. Tong had specifically begged her not to reveal anything about Ariel to Alicia, yet keeping silent feels wrong. After all, the child is staying here, and it feels strange for the baby to call her mother while Alicia, the child's real mother, remains completely unaware. Liana finally prepares to speak, intending to explain everything carefully. Before she can say a single word, however, Alicia suddenly begins sniffling. With trembling emotion, Alicia declares that Liana finally achieved what she always wanted. According to Alicia, Liana had constantly spoken about wanting to remain by His Majesty's side, and now things have turned out exactly as she desired. Alarmed, Liana immediately tries to correct the misunderstanding. She hurriedly explains that nothing inappropriate happened and that they merely fell accidentally. Alicia refuses to believe a single word. She raises her voice and insists that she already knows everything. Liana becomes completely bewildered, unable to comprehend what Alicia believes she knows in the first place. Alicia then continues emotionally, revealing that she heard their father had all authority over the family stripped away. Liana reluctantly admits that the basic information is technically true, though she quickly clarifies that it was not truly stripped away unfairly. Rather, the authority had simply been returned to the rightful heir from the beginning. Alicia, however, refuses to listen. She angrily claims that their frail father was sent directly onto the battlefield without hesitation. Liana nearly chokes in disbelief upon hearing Duke Harrington described as frail. In her mind, the Duke is practically overflowing with energy at all times. Trying to reason with her sister, Liana points out that Duke Harrington hardly resembles a weak or delicate man in any possible way. Alicia ignores the argument entirely and continues accusing her. She bitterly reminds Liana that she stood beside their father while he stepped into the portal leading to the battlefield after losing his authority. At that moment, Liana realizes Alicia has absolutely no intention of listening to logic. With a tired sigh, she asks what Alicia truly wishes to say. Alicia clenches her fists tightly while Liana inwardly notes that she herself somehow feels more like the bully in this conversation than Alicia does. Finally, Alicia bursts out with the accusation she had been holding back all along. She demands to know whether Liana hated seeing their father pushed aside in favor of her inheriting the ducal title. The accusation leaves Liana completely speechless. Alicia continues passionately, asking whether that resentment is the reason behind everything happening now. According to Alicia, Liana must be seeking revenge and deliberately orchestrating the current situation as payback. Before Liana can even process the absurd conclusion, Alicia suddenly brings up another rumor. She mentions hearing that Liana had recently been inside His Majesty's bathroom and accuses her of intentionally approaching the Emperor for her own schemes. Horrified, Liana instantly covers Alicia's mouth and desperately tells her to stop speaking so recklessly in front of the Emperor himself. Struggling to maintain composure, she tries to clarify the accusation, asking whether Alicia genuinely believes she deliberately approached His Majesty as part of some elaborate revenge plan. At that moment, Philip finally intervenes. In a calm yet chilling voice, he remarks that Alicia seems to think he is the kind of emperor who would become blinded by affection and easily manipulated. Realizing the dangerous implication of her words, Alicia immediately panics and insists that was not what she meant at all. Philip, however, coldly questions whether she perhaps inherited Duke Harrington's remarkable talent for speaking without thinking first. Alicia immediately protests, insisting that she never meant it in that way and that everything had only just begun. However, Philip merely turns his face away from her before shifting his attention toward Liana instead. His expression softens slightly as he asks why she is unable to drink. He wonders if she is feeling unwell and calmly offers to have someone bring her warm water mixed with honey. Liana hurriedly assures him that she is perfectly fine, yet Philip does not appear convinced. He points out that she drank far too much the previous night and remarks that she does not look well at all. Hearing that, Liana can only think to herself that although she genuinely appreciates his concern, should they not be focusing on Alicia instead of her right now? At that moment, Alicia raises her voice and calls out to His Majesty, declaring that she is the one destined to be by his side, not Liana. Philip looks at her with clear indifference before questioning what exactly she means, stating that he does not recall ever promising her such a position. Alicia quickly brings up the oracle, reminding him that their fates were sealed from birth. She insists that destiny itself tied them together. Yet Philip responds with visible irritation, asking whether she truly intends to bring up that ridiculous story once again. He refers to the prophecy claiming that someone from the Daphne bloodline would one day save him. However, after saying that, he briefly pauses as if reconsidering something. He remarks that, now that he thinks about it carefully, Alicia is not the only one who carries the Daphne bloodline. Perhaps, he says, The oracle was not entirely meaningless after all. Those words leave Liana completely confused. Internally, she wonders what exactly he means by salvation and oracles. None of this is making sense to her. Alicia's expression immediately twists with anger. She loudly insists that she is the only one with special powers and that Liana possesses absolutely no abilities at all. She goes on to say that her father, along with the late emperor himself, acknowledged her as the true other half meant for his majesty. Philip's gaze turns cold as he replies that, as expected, her father simply desires a puppet emperor who will obediently dance according to his commands. Alicia abruptly turns her face away from him. Even so, she stubbornly declares that regardless of what he says now, he will eventually marry her in the end. Just as she begins to leave, Philip suddenly calls out to her once more. This time, he calmly asks whether she truly wishes to marry him. Without the slightest hesitation, Alicia answers that of course she does. After saying those words, she leaves the room. The atmosphere that remains behind feels unbearably heavy. Liana quietly sits there for a moment before finally telling His Majesty that she also needs a moment outside. Once outside, she approaches Alicia and asks if the two of them can speak for a moment. Alicia immediately responds with hostility, demanding to know what Liana could possibly want and asking where she even gets the nerve to request a conversation with her. Even so, Liana remains calm. She gently tells Alicia that she understands perfectly well that Alicia is not feeling particularly warm toward her at the moment. Liana calmly tells Alicia that her father was the one who happened to be at home earlier. The moment she says that, Alicia immediately questions what exactly her father did. In response, Liana slowly rubs her face before asking Alicia to take a proper look at her. She quietly reveals that this was what the Duke did to her. Alicia's eyes widen slightly as she questions whether her father truly struck Liana. However, almost immediately afterward, she turns her face away and coldly thinks that Liana probably deserved it anyway. Liana decides not to dwell on the matter any longer. She tells Alicia to forget about it because she did not call her over merely to argue. Instead, she carefully asks Alicia whether she has a child. The question instantly causes Alicia's expression to harden. She sharply tells Liana to watch her mouth, accusing her of trying to humiliate her with ridiculous rumors. However, Liana quietly explains that the baby beside Alicia earlier was actually her daughter. Those words make Alicia visibly flinch before she hurriedly turns her face away again. Liana continues, asking whether Alicia did not hear her properly. She repeats that the baby from earlier was Alicia's own daughter. The moment those words leave her mouth, Alicia suddenly explodes in anger. She demands to know what her father has to do with her life and furiously asks why it should matter whether that child is alive or not. Hearing that leaves Liana shocked. She immediately grabs Alicia's hand and questions how she could possibly say something so cruel. But Alicia violently pulls back as she shouts that the child does not exist. She insists that there is no daughter in her life and warns Liana never to mention that child in front of her ever again. Liana freezes in disbelief. Just moments ago, Alicia had seemed weak and unstable, yet suddenly she possesses enough strength to forcefully push her away. Liana cannot understand where such strength suddenly came from. Confused, she asks Alicia why she is suddenly acting this way. At the same time, an unbearable sensation overwhelms her. It feels as though something inside her body is being ripped apart piece by piece. Alicia then tells Liana that she should simply continue behaving the way she always has. She questions why Liana is suddenly interfering now before coldly warning her not to do anything at all, because nothing she does will ever change anything. At that moment, Liana's eyes suddenly fall upon the ring on Alicia's hand. The gem embedded within it is glowing brightly. And somehow, the brighter that gem shines, the weaker Liana's body becomes. It feels as though all the strength is being drained directly from her body. Her legs tremble violently, and she grows so weak that she can barely remain standing. She begins to stagger backward. However, before she can collapse onto the ground, Philip suddenly appears and catches her in his arms. Seeing that, Alicia quietly states that she will be leaving now. Before turning away completely, she reminds Liana not to forget what she just said. Liana immediately calls out to her, asking her to wait for a moment longer. But Alicia never looks back. She simply walks away. Afterward, Liana slowly turns toward Philip. Trying to steady herself, she asks him when exactly he came outside. Philip calmly replies that he came out immediately after hearing a loud noise. Liana softly thanks him for catching her. She admits that she truly felt she needed to tell Alicia the truth about Ariel. Then, realizing how close they still are, she awkwardly mentions that he can probably let go of her now. At the same time, she wonders internally whether she startled him somehow. Embarrassed, she explains that her knees suddenly gave out beneath her and apologizes for worrying him. Even so, she insists that she is perfectly fine now. Philip, however, does not look convinced in the slightest. Instead, he asks her exactly what Alicia did to her. He points out that her body feels freezing cold and nothing about her condition seems normal at all. The scene shifts abruptly to Alicia storming through the hallway in frustration. She sharply orders everyone around her to move aside, her voice filled with irritation as servants and guards hurriedly step away from her path. Grinding her teeth in anger, she cannot stop thinking about how much Liana has changed recently. Even His Majesty has begun acting differently around her, and the entire situation irritates her beyond measure. At the same time, her attention drifts toward the ring on her finger. She keeps trying to remove it, but no matter how much force she applies, the ring refuses to come off. The more she struggles with it, the more frustrated she becomes. Just then, someone suddenly steps forward into her path. Immediately irritated by the interruption, Alicia glares at the man and demands to know what a mere guard thinks he is doing standing before her. She arrogantly orders him to leave at once. However, instead of obeying, the man simply lets out a quiet chuckle. His reaction only irritates her further. Alicia stares at him in disbelief, wondering if he truly intends to ignore her commands so casually. Angered, she quickly raises her hand and pulls attention toward the ring while shouting once again for him to leave immediately. Before she can continue, the man suddenly grabs her hand. His gaze settles directly on the ring as he calmly remarks that such an object is extremely valuable and should not be treated carelessly. Alicia freezes for a moment, caught off guard by the strange comment. She immediately demands to know what he means and questions who exactly he is. The man calmly explains that the ring was created from the heart of someone precious to her, so naturally she should treasure it properly. The words strike Alicia like lightning. Her eyes widen with shock as countless thoughts rush to her mind. How could this stranger possibly know about the ring? That secret should only be known by herself, her father, and the person connected to the ring's creation. No ordinary guard could possibly know such information. Her expression hardens instantly as suspicion fills her gaze. She questions whether he truly belongs to her family's guards and demands that he reveal his identity immediately. The man slowly rises to his feet before casually remarking that it is understandable she cannot recognize him in his current form. Then, with an almost amused smile, he greets her properly and comments that she has grown quite a lot since the last time he saw her. Alicia stares at him in complete confusion and disbelief, demanding to know what exactly he is doing here. Ignoring the tension entirely, the man casually comments that it is rather unfortunate the Duke happens to be trapped on the battlefield at such a crucial moment. According to him, the power must be replenished on time no matter what. His cryptic words only deepen Alicia's unease. The man then calmly tells her that they will meet again very soon and expresses hope that she will welcome him warmly when that time comes. He adds that it has been a long while since they last returned, so he is personally looking forward to it quite a bit. Before Alicia can ask another question, the man suddenly disappears without warning. The abrupt silence afterward feels suffocating. A servant cautiously approaches Alicia and asks whether they should depart now. Another person nearby hesitantly questions whether something is troubling her. Alicia remains frozen for several seconds before finally forcing herself to regain composure. She quietly insists that nothing is wrong and claims it is nothing important. Then, pushing aside her lingering unease, she orders everyone to continue moving. The scene then cuts back to Liana and Philip. Liana stares at him in confusion while asking what exactly he meant earlier when he claimed she did not feel warm. Philip quietly repeats that she truly does not feel warm at all, and to him, that feels incredibly strange. Even while speaking, he continues holding her tightly in his arms as though refusing to let go. Flustered by both the closeness and the strange atmosphere, Liana awkwardly asks him to release her for at least a moment. Philip, however, refuses immediately. She tells him that he does not need to let go completely, but asks if he could at least loosen his grip a little. Liana then takes hold of his hand and questions whether it still does not feel warm. Philip quietly answers that it does not. His response immediately causes unease to settle in her mind, because she herself cannot properly tell what is happening. Philip explains that ever since Alicia grabbed Liana's wrist earlier, he has been unable to feel her power. Even when he touches her now, his heart does not react with the same warmth as before. The words make Liana stare at him in disbelief. She asks whether there is truly no reaction at all, not even the slightest trace. Philip admits that there is still a tiny amount of power remaining, but it is so faint that he can barely sense it anymore. Hearing this, Liana's thoughts grow troubled. Earlier, When Alicia had seized her wrist, she distinctly felt as though something was being drained out of her body. At the time she had dismissed the sensation, yet now she cannot help wondering if that strange feeling was real. Could Alicia somehow have taken her ability away? Philip remarks that he has never heard of such a case before. His words only deepen Liana's confusion. Rationally, she knows it makes no sense. Alicia was not drawing blood or performing anything visible, so there should be no possible way for someone's power to simply disappear. Even so, a lingering fear remains in her chest. If, by some chance, her ability truly has vanished, then Philip could lose control again the moment he touches her. The thought alarms her enough that she hurriedly asks him to let her go. She warns him that if her ability is gone, then he should not be holding onto her like this at all. Philip, however, calmly tells her that although her power is extremely weak, some of it is still present, so everything should be fine for now. Yet even as he says this, he quietly pleads with her not to pull away, continuing to hold her tightly in his embrace. Liana notices the anxiety hidden beneath his composure. If her power disappears completely, she will no longer be capable of stopping his rampages the way she once could. Realizing this, she begins to understand why he is so afraid. Still, no matter the reason, remaining pressed against each other like this feels dangerous to her. Just then, the necklace begins ringing once more. Liana immediately reaches toward it, wondering how exactly she is supposed to answer the irritating device again. After fumbling with it for a moment, she finally manages to activate the communication stone. At once, the Chancellor's frantic voice bursts through, demanding to know whether the two of them are still at the estate. Liana answers that they are, which only seems to make him even more distressed. He urgently warns them that they absolutely must not leave the room under any circumstances. Not long afterward, Philip and Liana return to her room. Once inside, she asks him whether he has calmed down at least a little now. Philip replies that he has. Liana then points out that it has not even been a full day since she declared that she would become his cure, yet now everything has already become complicated. Her words make Philip pause in surprise as he asks whether she actually remembers saying that. Confused, Liana questions what he means. Philip explains that he is referring to her statement about becoming his cure, because he had assumed she would not remember any of it after drinking so much alcohol. Liana immediately tells him that she was not drunk enough to forget something like that. However, her expression soon darkens again as her thoughts return to the real issue. If her ability truly has disappeared, then what will happen now? More importantly, will her power ever return? Philip admits that he does not know the answer. He says that he will probably need to consult the elders regarding the matter. Liana looks at him with confusion and asks who exactly he means by the elders. Philip explains that they are the people she saw earlier through the communication stone. At that very moment, the Chancellor suddenly arrives in person. Liana immediately wonders whether Philip had been referring to him, but Philip confirms that he was not. Before the situation can be explained further, another man abruptly barges into the room. He impatiently orders the first man to move aside and insists that they close the door immediately. The atmosphere rapidly turns chaotic as the two men hurriedly shut the door behind them. Outside, loud banging instantly erupts against the entrance. Voices can be heard demanding to know whether His Majesty is inside. Watching the entire scene unfold before her eyes, Liana can only stare in bewilderment, wondering what on earth these people have dragged into the estate with them this time. The commotion outside grows louder and louder, and she cannot help thinking that at this rate the estate doors themselves are going to break down completely. At last, one of them addresses Liana and tells her that it is a pleasure to meet her. He introduces himself as the Elder of the Dark, while the Elder of the Light also offers his greetings soon afterward. The two elders make it clear that there is no need for unnecessary formality in their presence, hoping to ease her tension despite the abrupt situation surrounding them. Although Liana appreciates their kindness, her attention quickly shifts elsewhere. She questions who the people outside are and asks what could have possibly brought them there so suddenly, especially after they had only recently been instructed to come to the palace. The atmosphere immediately becomes somewhat reluctant and uneasy. The Elder of the Dark admits that he is not entirely certain how the news spread so quickly, but he explains that several nobles from Duke Haddington's side have already swarmed the palace grounds. Upon hearing this, the Elder of the Light remarks that the matter likely began because word spread about the minor punishment placed upon the Duke. Their expressions carry clear annoyance toward the nobles who are already attempting to involve themselves. Liana immediately apologizes, saying that she feels sorry for putting His Majesty into such a difficult position. However, Philip quickly reassures her that none of this is her fault at all. The others share the same opinion without hesitation, insisting that there is absolutely no reason for her to apologize because the Duke alone is responsible for the entire matter. At the same time, the elders cannot help but notice that His Majesty is calmly holding someone's hand without the slightest sign of discomfort. The sight secretly relieves them because they realize that he truly is not going on a rampage. For a brief moment, they become distracted by the shocking image before remembering that this is hardly the time for such thoughts. The Elder of the Dark soon suggests that they should avoid those troublesome nobles and immediately return to the palace through the teleportation portal before the situation grows even more chaotic. While speaking, however, they suddenly notice that His Majesty's ears have turned a striking shade of bright red. The sight leaves them wondering whether something might be wrong with him. Liana quickly attempts to explain the situation. She carefully says that she assumes His Majesty was simply startled earlier. Her explanation only confuses them further because the idea that their emperor could actually become startled by something feels almost unbelievable to them. Trying to clarify herself, she continues by explaining that her power, more specifically, her ability to keep His Majesty warm, has weakened. The moment those words leave her mouth, the Elder of the Dark reacts immediately, pointing out that she mentioned nothing about such an important matter during their communication earlier that morning. Liana then admits that something unexpected happened in the meantime. The Elder of the Light instantly rushes toward her in alarm, demanding to know what in the world has happened. Nevertheless, before allowing any further explanation, he insists that details can wait until later and asks her to come with him immediately instead. His sudden behavior causes the Elder of the Dark to shout after him in frustration. Even if the other elder leaves now, he questions how he is supposed to deal with all those people outside by himself. Despite the complaint, the Elder of the Light pays little attention to his protests and continues regardless of the situation unfolding around them. The Elder of the Light carefully explains to Liana that although her ability has indeed weakened, the power itself possesses regenerative qualities, meaning it should naturally return to normal after some time. He reassures her further by stating that as long as His Majesty does not fall into another rampage while the ability recovers, there should not be any serious problems to worry about. Hearing this, the Elder of the Dark confidently gives a thumbs up and declares that there is absolutely no need to worry about that particular issue. However, because of his earlier actions and distraction, nobody remains behind to properly secure the door. As a result, several people suddenly begin barging into the room without permission. The nobles immediately start voicing their outrage toward His Majesty. One of them loudly declares that sending the Duke to the battlefield without proper equipment simply because he lightly struck Liana is completely unacceptable and far too excessive as punishment. In the middle of the commotion, one of the nobles even attempts to touch His Majesty directly. Philip instantly yanks the man's hand away with visible displeasure, yet the noble continues shouting regardless. He insists that someone as delicate as the Duke should never be treated so harshly over such a matter. Philip quietly murmurs a curse beneath his breath. The moment Liana hears him, she immediately asks whether that person touched him. Philip calmly explains that the noble merely brushed against him for a brief moment. Still concerned, Liana asks if he is truly all right. Philip reassures her that he is perfectly fine because the contact was minimal and should not cause any issue. At that point, the Elder of the Light completely loses his patience. He begins furiously scolding the nobles, demanding to know what on earth they think they are doing. Regardless of their status or rank, he questions how they dare lay their hands upon His Majesty's body so carelessly. The noblemen hesitate under his furious glare, though one eventually stammers that they only acted because His Majesty refused to meet with them earlier. Instead of calming the elder, the explanation only infuriates him even further. He sharply demands whether the man truly considers such an excuse acceptable behavior, calling their actions unbelievably rude. Having no other option, the nobles begin shouting once again. One of them points directly toward Liana and loudly remarks that even amidst such chaos, Lady Liana is still clinging to His Majesty. He continues by claiming that the rumors surrounding her have never been favorable and argues that the Duke likely raised his hand against her because of such improper behavior. According to him, the Duke is actually the one who has been wronged in this situation. The noble continues rambling dramatically, wondering aloud how the Duke is supposed to endure the freezing cold battlefield without a proper fur coat. He even complains that he is terribly worried about whether the Duke's meals will suit his tastes during his stay there. Listening to the ridiculous complaints, the Emperor lets out a cold scoff. He remarks that the nobles sound more like overprotective nannies than loyal retainers. If they are truly so worried about the Duke, then they should simply follow him to the battlefield themselves. Philip even states that he would personally open a portal for them if necessary. The noble immediately shrinks back and hurriedly claims that he is rather frail and cannot possibly travel because he has important paperwork that absolutely must be processed by the end of the day. Hearing such shameless excuses causes Philip's body to suddenly stumble slightly. Liana instantly notices and anxiously asks whether he is truly all right. Philip once again insists that he is fine, but despite his reassurance, she cannot stop worrying. No matter how much she continues touching him, his body refuses to grow warm at all. At this rate, she fears the nobles may eventually discover the truth about His Majesty's condition. Anxiety rapidly fills her thoughts as she wonders what she should do now. At that moment, someone quietly whispers toward her side. It is the Elder of the Dark. He repeatedly tries to signal something to her with exaggerated gestures, causing Liana to stare at him in confusion. She cannot understand why he keeps tapping around his mouth so insistently. Finally, after struggling to communicate silently, the Elder manages to indicate that she should kiss him. Liana immediately freezes in shock. She cannot believe that he is seriously suggesting that she kiss Philip. Even though she willingly volunteered herself to become Philip's cure, kissing him directly on the lips still feels far too overwhelming to her. However, her hesitation begins fading the moment she notices Philip trembling slightly once again. A painful realization strikes her. He is suffering like this now because he helped her yesterday. Compared to that, worrying over something as trivial as a kiss suddenly feels meaningless. Gathering her courage, she quietly tells Philip that the elders said they must kiss in order to stop the rampage. She hurriedly assures him that she has absolutely no ulterior motives and that this is purely for the sake of treatment. Then, without allowing herself time to hesitate further, she leans forward and kisses him. Deep inside, she silently prays to God, desperately hoping that this will work. She notices that his breath is so cold that it feels as though it could freeze her where she stands, yet she cannot help but think that he must be suffering far more than she is at this moment. Because of that, she once again desperately prays to the gods, silently begging for her method to work. As she presses closer to him, he suddenly flinches, and the reaction immediately makes her worry. She hurriedly questions whether he is truly all right, but instead of answering properly, he weakly asks what exactly she is doing. She leans in and quietly whispers to him that he had nearly gone on a complete rampage in front of everyone. While trying to explain herself, she notices him slowly turning his face toward her as though he wants to tell her something important. At first, she does not understand what he means, but when his gaze lowers toward her lips, realization instantly strikes her. Only then does she notice that he is blushing as well. The moment she understands what he is trying to imply, she abruptly jumps back in shock. Embarrassment floods her face as she hurriedly insists that he clearly is not cold anymore, meaning her method must have worked after all. Even so, the entire situation leaves her feeling as though she has done something terribly improper. Almost immediately, murmurs begin spreading throughout the crowd. The nobles stare at the two of them in utter disbelief, questioning whether they are truly seeing what they think they just witnessed. Others begin whispering that the rumors must have been true all along. Jumping on top of His Majesty in broad daylight is far too scandalous for anyone to ignore, and the scene leaves everyone completely stunned. Those whispers only make her blush harder. Panic begins filling her mind as she wonders what she is supposed to do now. She had only rushed to him because the situation had been urgent, yet she had never once stopped to think about the aftermath of her action. To make matters worse, there are no Vespers around to explain away the situation, and his continued blushing only makes everything seem even more suspicious. Instead of calming down, he appears to be getting even warmer, which only makes her feel increasingly flustered. Just as the commotion threatens to spiral further out of control, someone suddenly calls for everyone to calm themselves. Attention quickly shifts toward the speaker, and it becomes apparent that it is the eldest of the Dark family. Surprisingly, the elder is smiling brightly despite the chaos surrounding them. One of the nobles immediately demands an explanation, questioning what exactly is happening between His Majesty and the young lady. The noble points out that the two of them had also been seen holding hands during the banquet the previous evening. Another person begins suggesting that perhaps the relationship between them is far more intimate than anyone previously realized. Before the speculation can continue any further, the elder of the Dark family calmly confirms their suspicion. He announces that the two of them are indeed engaged to be married. The declaration shocks the entire gathering into silence. The scene then shifts to Liana, who remains completely overwhelmed by everything unfolding around her. Confusion fills her thoughts as she wonders what they are even supposed to do now. Although the sudden announcement successfully prevents the nobles from continuing to provoke or challenge them, introducing the possibility of her becoming the future empress feels far too extreme. The elder of the Dark family explains that, for the time being, it would be best for the two of them to pretend to be lovers until the situation settles down. According to him, maintaining such appearances will help calm public speculation and prevent further political complication. Philip immediately apologizes to Liana, expressing guilt that she has been dragged into such a troublesome mess because of him. The moment she hears that, she quickly insists that none of this is his fault. However, as she looks at him more carefully, she notices that he is blushing once again. The sight causes her own face to heat up immediately, forcing her to quickly turn away in embarrassment. Even so, she still reassures him that he truly did nothing wrong. Deep down, she worries that she may have actually been the one who placed him in such a difficult situation. Because of that, she quietly admits to herself that she is simply relieved she managed to help him somehow. Philip gently tells her that she really is an amazing person and sincerely thanks her for standing by him and saying those words. Not long after, one of the others present points out that their current situation may actually work in their favor. Hearing that causes Liana to look confused once more, prompting the elder to elaborate further. He begins explaining that if they wish to stop His Majesty from losing control and rampaging again, the elders explain that if the two of them truly need to make physical contact in order to stabilize His Majesty's condition, then it would be far better to have a proper justification for doing so. After all, constantly grabbing onto one another without even being in a relationship would only attract more suspicion and unnecessary gossip from the nobles. Hearing that reasoning, Liana reluctantly admits that they do have a point. Even if the situation feels absurd, pretending to be lovers at least gives them a believable excuse for remaining close to one another. However, before she can think any further about it, she suddenly notices a familiar small figure appearing from seemingly nowhere. The sight immediately startles her, and she questions when Ariel even managed to get there in the first place. She has not seen the child for quite some time, making the sudden appearance even more surprising. A moment later, Ariel begins sneezing repeatedly. Liana quickly realizes that the little girl must have been hiding behind the curtains for a while. She gently tells her that staying hidden in such a dusty place would obviously make her sneeze. Picking Ariel up into her arms, she softly says that they should clean her nose properly. While comforting the child, Liana suddenly notices the strange looks the elders are giving her. Their expressions are unusually thoughtful, almost suspicious, which immediately makes her uneasy. One of them finally comments that the child resembles her quite a lot. Liana casually replies that she already knows that much. The elders then cautiously question whether Ariel might actually be her daughter. Before she can properly react, another elder goes even further and wonders aloud whether the child could possibly be the daughter of both Liana and His Majesty. The moment those words leave their mouths, both Liana and Philip immediately shout in complete disbelief, demanding to know what exactly they're talking about because such a thing is absolutely not true. To their surprise, the elders actually look disappointed by the denial. Watching their reactions, Liana cannot help but think that the elders seriously need to be more reasonable. It has only been slightly over a month since she first met Philip, so the idea of them somehow already having a child together makes absolutely no sense. Even so, the elders continue insisting that the child resembles Liana far too much for it to be ignored. Just as Liana prepares to explain that Ariel is actually her cousin's daughter, Ariel suddenly blurts out the word mama while pointing directly at Liana. The atmosphere freezes instantly. As if that were not disastrous enough already, Ariel then points toward Philip and happily calls him dad. Complete silence overtakes the room. Liana hurriedly tries to explain that everyone is misunderstanding the situation. She awkwardly insists that Ariel is simply not very articulate yet and tends to misuse certain words. Unfortunately, before she can recover the situation, Ariel points toward one of the elders and calls him grandpa before babbling something about bread and chocolate. Rather than clearing things up, the scene only delights the elders even more. They immediately begin praising the child for being clever and speaking so well at such a young age. Running out of excuses, Liana weakly comments that it seems Ariel's pronunciation has improved considerably already. Desperate to fix the misunderstanding, she attempts to teach Ariel properly by asking her to repeat after her and call her Liana instead. However, Ariel stubbornly continues calling her mama. Philip attempts the same thing, trying to correct the child as well, yet Ariel continues calling him dad no matter what they say. The situation leaves both of them completely bewildered. Liana questions why Ariel insists on only calling them that, while Philip honestly admits that he has absolutely no idea either. Trying to regain control of the conversation, Liana firmly explains that her cousin merely left Ariel in her care temporarily, so everyone needs to stop getting strange ideas. Even then, she notices the elders quietly whispering among themselves. They remark that it does not really matter because the two of them still have plenty of chances in the future. One elder even casually comments that if the child is not theirs yet, then they can simply make it happen eventually. Hearing every single word perfectly clearly, Liana immediately feels the urge to remind them that she can, in fact, hear everything they are saying. The Elder of Light then suddenly comments that perhaps it is divine love itself that allows Lady Liana to calm His Majesty's rampages. Ignoring the embarrassing implication, Liana instead decides to ask the question that has been bothering her the most. She asks whether there is any way to remove the ice shard lodged inside His Majesty's heart. The elders explain that they have at least confirmed one thing so far. Whenever physical contact is made during one of his rampages, His Majesty's body temperature gradually begins warming up again. Unfortunately, beyond that observation, they still possess very little information. The Elder of Light then admits that he actually does have a certain theory in mind, although he cannot say anything with certainty yet. Because of that, he promises to explain more once he finishes investigating the matter properly. For now, however, he insists that the two of them simply need to maintain regular physical contact with one another. Liana immediately points out that she is already doing exactly that. The elders quickly clarify that they mean she must increase the amount of contact significantly. According to them, the two of them should interact physically as often as possible. Confused, Liana questions exactly how much qualifies as a lot. The elders vaguely explain that they should simply continue whenever opportunities arise. Holding hands, hugging, staying close together consistently, anything that allows warmth and contact to continue little by little may slowly melt away the ice over time. Having no better alternative available, Liana reluctantly agrees. The Elder of Light then comments that the situation is especially interesting because, according to all the knowledge he possesses, Liana herself does not appear to have any fire-related abilities whatsoever. At that moment, Philip suddenly reveals that he has something important he wishes to ask regarding that topic. With a serious expression, he asks whether abilities can actually be stolen from another person. The question immediately causes Liana to gulp nervously. The elder questions him about what exactly he means by that statement. In response, he explains that just a short while ago, when Lady Alicia touched Liana, she claimed that it felt as though the ability within her body was disappearing. Hearing this, the elder turns toward Liana and asks whether everything His Majesty said is true. Liana confirms his words, admitting that she indeed felt something leaving her body at that moment. Her answer throws everyone into confusion. The elders immediately begin questioning whether there had been anything unusual when she came into contact with Alicia. Liana initially tells them that nothing particularly strange happened. However, a sudden memory flashes through her mind, and she quickly recalls one important detail. She explains that Alicia had been wearing a ring with a red gem embedded in it. The very instant that ring touched her skin, she felt as though something was being pulled out from within her body. At the time, she silently wonders to herself what exactly is happening. The sensation feels horrifying, almost as if something deep inside her is being forcibly torn away. One of the elders narrows his eyes as a thought crosses his mind. Before he can fully voice it, another elder abruptly rises from his seat and informs His Majesty that he will make a quick trip to the palace through the portal. Without wasting another second, he disappears. After some time passes, he finally returns. The moment he arrives, Liana stares at the object in his hands and questions what it is. The elder explains that after hearing her description earlier, something immediately came to his mind, so he went to retrieve it. He then asks her whether the object resembles what she saw before. Liana carefully observes it before answering that it does look similar. However, she explains that the one Alicia wore was much smaller, and the red color of its gem had been far more vivid and bright. Unable to suppress her curiosity, she slowly reaches out to touch the gem. The instant her fingers make contact with it, the exact same sensation from before surges through her body again. The feeling causes her to flinch violently. Philip immediately calls out to her in alarm. Liana quickly assures him that she is fine. More importantly, she wants to know what this object truly is. The Elder of Light then reveals that the gem is a dragon heart. Liana stares at him in disbelief, questioning what exactly a dragon heart is. The elder calmly explains that, based on her description, the gem she saw earlier is indeed a fragment of a dragon heart. He further explains that depending on the nature and attributes of the dragon artery from which it originates, a dragon heart possesses the ability to absorb powers that are similar to its own. Philip quietly remarks that the explanation appears to be correct. Just moments earlier, he had completely stopped sensing Liana's ability. That realization leaves no room for doubt. Liana truly possesses an ability. The thought immediately sends shock through her mind. In the original novel, Liana is clearly described as someone who possesses no ability at all. Because of this, she cannot help but wonder whether something changed the moment she entered this body. If her existence has already begun altering the flow of the novel, then the consequences could become far more serious than she imagined. The elderly man interrupts her spiraling thoughts and tells her to look closely at the dragon heart once more. He asks whether she can see the flames flickering inside it. He then explains that those flames are the special ability that had been absorbed from her body earlier. After examining the situation, it becomes apparent that the gem embedded in the ring Lady Alicia wore is most likely a fragment of a dragon heart. He further explains that the fragment has been passed down for generations as a treasured family heirloom within the Duke's household. Philip then turns toward Liana once again and asks whether the color of the gem before them is the same as the one she saw earlier. Liana explains that the shape of the gem is exactly the same, but the one she saw earlier had been much redder. Its color had resembled vivid, fresh blood. Hearing this, the elder mutters that his assumption must have been correct. The dragon heart belonging to the Duke's family has likely faded over the generations since it has been passed down for such a long time. He explains that the more faded the color becomes, the weaker the gem's power grows. Those words immediately make Liana realize something. She admits that he is right because, unlike before, she does not feel as though much of her energy has been drained this time. Her body also does not feel weak. The gem she encountered earlier had been blood red, while this one appears much duller in comparison. The elder's expression turns grave as he explains that there is only one possible situation in which a dragon heart would possess such a vivid glow. Liana questions what kind of situation he means. The elder calmly explains that when a dragon heart has only recently been harvested, its color remains blood red. However, the more time that passes after the dragon's death, the more the color and the power gradually fade. Still, he admits that he has not heard any reports about a dragon dying recently. At that moment, another elder suddenly speaks up and points out that there actually is one dragon who died not too long ago. The Elder of Darkness immediately questions what he is talking about. In response, the Elder of Light asks whether he has not heard the rumors spreading throughout the land. Numerous stories claim that the dragon of the Western Forest has died. Philip's expression darkens at those words. He asks whether they are referring to that foolish dragon. He bitterly remarks that the creature never knew how to be wary of anyone. The elders confirm that they are indeed speaking about Lord Karks. They further explain that when his body was discovered, his heart was missing. Philip sharply questions whether that means the dragon was murdered. However, the elder replies that nothing has been confirmed yet. At that moment, Liana notices Ariel's unusual reaction and immediately turns toward her. She wonders whether Ariel sensed something was wrong. Meanwhile, the elder continues explaining that there had also supposedly been a child about to be born. Since only one body was found, the child may have escaped together with its mother. Of course, he admits that this part could simply be a rumor as well. As Liana gently pats Ariel, she asks what is wrong with her and wonders whether she might be hungry. Philip agrees that it is possible. Earlier, Ariel spilled her milk and failed to have a proper breakfast. That statement causes a sudden thought to cross Liana's mind. She quickly tells them that, in that case, she will head downstairs for a moment. Philip immediately asks whether she wants him to accompany her, but Liana shakes her head and says it will be faster if she goes alone. Philip reluctantly agrees and tells her to be careful and not to rush and trip. Liana assures him that she will do her best to stay cautious. Watching the two of them interact so naturally fills the elders with delight. One of them suddenly calls out to Liana, reminding her not to forget something important. She turns back in confusion and asks whether she missed something again. The elders loudly declare that she must melt the ice surrounding His Majesty's heart and that, in order to achieve that, she must touch him as often as possible. Liana immediately responds that she already knows that and remembers it perfectly well. However, the elders continue insisting that she should not focus solely on the baby while neglecting them as well. Before the elder can continue speaking further, Philip abruptly grabs the man's face and cuts him off. He then calmly tells Liana to have a safe trip downstairs. Their behavior instantly causes Liana to blush in embarrassment. She inwardly wonders what kind of nonsense they are talking about when a baby is crying her lungs out. Judging from the way the elders are acting, it feels less like a serious discussion and more as though they are already making wedding plans. The moment Liana leaves the room, Philip slowly turns toward the elders. Seeing his expression immediately causes cold sweat to form on their faces as he quietly states that the three of them need to have a talk. He tells the elders to investigate the relationship between the Harrington family and Liana. The question of the connection between the Duke family and Lady Liana continues to bother him because it does not seem as though they are merely ordinary relatives. He explains that it did not feel like yesterday was truly the first time the Duke encountered Liana, and that strange sense of familiarity refuses to leave his mind. Along with that, he orders them to look into whether there is anything they still do not know about the abilities possessed by both Liana and Alicia. One of the elders assures him that they will conduct a thorough investigation. The elder even declares that they will dig so deeply into the matter that they will learn how many spoons exist inside the Duke estate itself. Hearing such an exaggerated statement immediately makes him tell them that there is no need to go that far. A weary sigh escapes him afterward as he quietly admits to himself that, despite everything, he truly knows almost nothing about her. He realizes that he had been so blinded by the fact that she possessed the potential to surpass his own power that he never stopped to think about anything else concerning her. Yet before he can continue reflecting on the matter calmly, his thoughts once again drift back to their kiss. The moment that memory resurfaces, his entire face burns red with embarrassment. The elder notices his flushed expression immediately and remarks that his face has become bright red again. Concernedly, the elder wonders if he might be falling ill and even asks whether they should summon the palace physician. However, he quickly refuses and tells them not to bother with such unnecessary things. Instead, he simply orders them to begin the investigation he requested without delay. A few days later, Liana finds herself growing increasingly frustrated. She seriously cannot understand what has happened ever since she became Philip's fake lover. For some reason, he has suddenly begun keeping his distance from her. Only a short while ago, he had constantly followed her around, shamelessly begging her to touch him and clinging to her whenever possible. Now, however, his behavior has changed completely. She cannot help wondering what the point of deciding to become his cure is if the person who supposedly needs treatment refuses to even come near her. Whenever she tries to approach him, he only reacts with awkward hesitation, which leaves her even more confused. Meanwhile, she truly does not understand why he is behaving this way. Part of her wonders whether he hated the kiss that much, but she had only kissed him because she was worried about his condition. In her eyes, his current reaction feels far too harsh. The elders had specifically instructed her to maintain as much physical contact with him as possible, yet now he barely allows her to touch even a single finger. While she remains troubled over the matter, one of the dark elders suddenly brings up an upcoming charity event. The elder politely asks her to attend the event as His Majesty's partner. The request instantly leaves her bewildered because things between them are already unbearably awkward, and now they expect her to appear publicly beside him as well. However, the elder appears genuinely confused by her reluctance. In the elder's eyes, she is already His Majesty's lover, so attending together should naturally not be an issue. Liana quickly insists that their relationship is only fake, but the elders immediately begin exaggerating the situation dramatically. They claim that if she refuses to attend, His Majesty will surely wander around the venue acting strangely once again. According to them, he will probably start picking fights with random nobles like some troublesome delinquent. Hearing such ridiculous accusations immediately makes Philip inwardly question when he has ever done anything like that before. The elders continue their dramatic complaints regardless. They insist that he will recklessly touch something suspicious, lose control of his powers, and inevitably go on another rampage. Afterward, they say they will once again be forced to drag his frozen body all the way back to the palace while also dealing with the countless witnesses who saw the embarrassing spectacle unfold. Finally, they conclude with pitiful expressions that there is nothing they can do if she truly does not wish to go. After all, they claim that the poor old man will simply have to suffer a little more because of it. Seeing the elders behave so dramatically, Liana finally gives in and tells them that she will attend the charity event. The moment she agrees, the elders become visibly excited and immediately begin urging her to hurry and prepare for the party by going into town. At the same time, they loudly tell His Majesty to get up as well and accompany her. Their sudden enthusiasm leaves Liana confused, and she asks why they cannot simply summon people to the palace to help them prepare instead. However, the two elders immediately begin pushing both of them toward the exit while complaining about how the young couple has been cooped up indoors for far too long. According to them, the two of them should at least go outside together once in a while and get some fresh air like normal people. She then brings up Ariel, wondering who will stay behind to watch over her while they are away. In response, Ariel happily smiles and innocently tells them that Mama and Baba should go because she will play together with Grandpa instead. Hearing such a complete sentence from the little girl leaves Liana stunned for a moment, making her wonder if the angelic child can already speak in short sentences so clearly. As they prepare to leave, the elders continue adding unnecessary remarks. They remind the two of them that while they are out in public, they should make sure to show everyone how affectionate they are together. Otherwise, people may begin doubting whether they are truly lovers at all. Liana immediately pouts at the absurd request and comments that people would be lucky if they did not mistake the two of them for sworn enemies instead. After all, Philip can barely even look her in the eyes anymore. The moment she says that, Philip's skin turns bright red once again. Watching his reaction only makes Liana more frustrated because he still refuses to explain why he has suddenly started acting this way. Nevertheless, she already promised that she would become his cure, so she decides not to dwell on it any longer. Instead, she tells him to hurry up because she is leaving already. Philip quietly agrees and says that he will go with her. Eventually, the two of them arrive at the market together. At one point, Liana casually calls him by his name, and afterwards she remarks that calling him so informally feels a little strange, does it not? Because of that awkwardness, she suggests that perhaps they should return to speaking formally again. However, Philip immediately refuses. He hurriedly says something in response, but the sound of a nearby bell interrupts his words before she can hear him properly. A moment later, he repeats himself more clearly and shyly asks her to please continue calling him by his name. Liana agrees casually, though inwardly she cannot help thinking about how difficult he is making such a simple request seem. Lately, he has become so much shyer than before that it almost feels like she is dealing with an entirely different person. As she begins walking ahead, she notices that Philip has stopped moving. Looking back at him, she questions why he is just standing there blocking the entrance instead of coming inside. In response, he hesitantly asks if she can try saying it again. Confused, she asks what exactly he means, and he quietly motions for her to call him by his name once more. Liana tells him that saying his name is hardly something difficult. However, she suddenly decides to tease him a little by declaring that she will only do it if he holds her hand first. If he refuses, then she will refuse to call him by his name as well, and they should simply hurry inside already because she is going in. The instant she says that, Philip immediately grabs her hand without hesitation. Feeling his hand suddenly clutch hers causes her to stare at him in surprise, and she wonders why he had been holding back all this time when it was apparently this easy for him. Philip quietly tells her that it was not easy at all. His answer only leaves her more puzzled, and she asks whether he is perhaps angry with her or something. She adds that she cannot possibly understand what he is thinking unless he actually tells her. Just as he seems about to explain himself, his expression suddenly brightens completely. His face begins glowing with happiness as he softly points out that she called him by his name. Liana smiles gently and confirms that yes, she did. Seeing his obvious happiness makes her laugh slightly, which immediately causes Philip to question why she is laughing at him. In return, she asks him why he is smiling so much instead. Philip pauses for a moment as though he himself has not realized his expression changed. After thinking about it, he quietly admits that he is probably smiling because he feels happy. He then confesses that it has been an incredibly long time since someone last called him by his name so naturally. Because of that, he never realized that something as simple as hearing his own name from another person could make him feel this happy. The sincerity in his words suddenly causes Liana's entire face to flush bright red. At the same time, she begins hearing the sound of loud heartbeats echoing in her ears. For a brief moment, she wonders whether the heartbeat she is hearing belongs to Philip or to herself. Philip softly calls out to her, but the moment she hears his voice, she jolts in embarrassment and hurriedly tells him not to look at her. Without waiting for a response, she rushes inside the shop while flusteredly declaring that she will be waiting inside. Meanwhile, elsewhere nearby, another individual suddenly appears from the shadows and sniffs the air carefully. The person quietly mutters that this scent belongs to Alicia. At the same time, Liana remains inside with her face completely red from embarrassment while Philip stands outside looking utterly confused by her sudden reaction. Philip watches Liana gulp down water with unusual urgency and cannot help asking why she is drinking it as if it were alcohol. She quickly explains that she is only trying to clear her head, yet her answer leaves him even more confused than before. After the alcohol settles in her system, Liana gradually returns to normal. Earlier, she had only been startled because Philip had suddenly pushed that dangerously handsome face so close to hers without warning. Now she realizes that she does not feel nervous anymore, not even when their hands brush against each other. However, the moment she notices him pulling his hand away again, her thoughts begin to wander. Ever since she accidentally called his name earlier, he has been meeting her eyes more often and unconsciously moving closer to her, so she cannot understand why he keeps retreating whenever things become even slightly intimate. Unable to ignore it any longer, she decides that this situation cannot continue and insists that the two of them need to have a proper talk. Philip looks puzzled by her serious tone, uncertain about what exactly she wants to discuss. Liana then confronts him directly in her own way, questioning why he keeps avoiding her. She wonders if he dislikes it whenever she touches him. The moment those words leave her mouth, Philip immediately denies it in a panic. The very idea sounds completely wrong to him, and he hurriedly tries to clear up the misunderstanding. Liana reaches toward him again and asks him to hold her hand properly this time. Since earlier, he has not truly held it even once, and now she impatiently urges him to hurry up and do it. Philip reluctantly agrees, telling her that he will hold her hand, but he also asks her to calm down and sit properly first. Even as he reaches toward her, his heartbeat becomes wildly unstable. In the end, he barely manages to touch a single one of her fingers instead of taking her whole hand. The weak attempt immediately frustrates Liana. She points out that he cannot seriously believe that touching only one finger counts as holding hands. Philip awkwardly insists that he truly tried his best. His excuse only irritates her further, and she questions whether he even listened to what the elder said earlier. He answers that he did hear everything clearly. Liana then reminds him that the elder specifically said they need as much physical contact as possible if they want to determine whether the ice is melting or not. Philip repeats that he understands, but his hesitant behavior says otherwise. That contradiction presses on her patience even more. She tells him that words alone are useless and that he needs to prove it through his actions instead. Her growing irritation becomes obvious as she argues that there is no way the ice will melt from such insignificant contact. If they are truly going to test this properly, then they should do it seriously. In her mind, touching each other's bodies would obviously have a much stronger effect than something as simple as holding hands. Driven by that thought, she begins leaning closer to him without hesitation. The instant she does, Philip abruptly blurts out that his head hurts. Liana pauses in confusion, questioning whether his head really hurts that badly. Concerned, she moves closer and leans against his chest, trying to check on him more carefully. The moment she presses near his heart, she realizes he is not joking at all. His heartbeat feels alarmingly irregular beneath her touch, and she immediately suspects that he is suffering from arrhythmia. Before she can say much more, Philip quickly rises to his feet. Unable to endure the closeness any longer, he hurriedly says that he is going outside for some fresh air for a moment before turning to leave. While Liana calls out after Philip, confusion rapidly overwhelms her thoughts. She cannot understand what is happening anymore, and the more she thinks about it, the more serious the situation begins to feel. Before she can process everything properly, the strange man from earlier suddenly appears in front of her again. The sight of him immediately catches her attention. She is certain she has never personally met him before, yet his appearance is impossible to mistake. His silver hair, so pale that it almost looks white, contrasts sharply against his vivid red eyes. The moment she notices those features, realization strikes her, and she wonders if this man could possibly be Aaron. Without any hesitation, the man casually thanks her for the meal before suddenly leaning down toward her neck. The next second, he begins sucking blood from it as though such behavior is perfectly normal. Liana freezes in shock for only a brief moment before panic and anger explode inside her mind. She cannot even comprehend who this lunatic thinks he is. Immediately, she forcefully shoves him away from her. Instead of looking guilty, however, the man only appears confused by her reaction. Liana instantly recognizes exactly who he must be now. Aaron is the Tower Master, the first male lead of the novel, and one of the people who absolutely despises Liana. In the original story, he is infamous for shamelessly biting and sucking blood from Alicia's neck even in broad daylight without caring about who sees him. Because of that dangerous personality, Liana has always intended to avoid him entirely. Now that he is suddenly attached to her instead, panic begins ringing loudly inside her head. She immediately starts shouting at him to back off. Her reaction only seems to confuse Aaron even more. Liana repeats herself more aggressively, warning him to stay away unless he wants her to rip every strand of his hair out. To her complete disbelief, Aaron suddenly looks distressed and almost starts crying. He hurriedly promises that he will not do it again, leaving Liana utterly speechless. She cannot help wondering what kind of insane person behaves like this. The Alicia he is supposed to obsess over is nowhere near here, yet he is clinging to her instead. Poor Eren desperately begs her to let him taste her blood just one more time, insisting that he only wants another bite. Lyanna, however, only grows more horrified and continues yelling at him to get away from her immediately. Without holding back, she kicks him hard and angrily calls him a complete lunatic. After being hit repeatedly, Eren finally weakly claims that he understands and says he is done now. Lyanna immediately snaps back at him, asking who in their right mind would suddenly bite a complete stranger's neck in the first place. She openly calls him insane. Eren, however, looks almost offended instead. He honestly explains that her scent smelled delicious, so he simply could not resist. His answer leaves Lyanna completely dumbfounded. She cannot believe he is acting as though he is somehow the victim here. Unable to tolerate his nonsense any longer, she sarcastically asks whether her blood at least tasted good. Eren shamelessly answers yes and immediately asks for one more bite. Lyanna internally screams in frustration. Clearly, this man has completely lost his mind. In the original story, he bites the female lead the very first moment they meet, so perhaps he truly has never been normal to begin with. Still, this situation is rapidly becoming dangerous. She needs to get rid of him before Philip returns and sees any of this. Unfortunately, the exact moment she thinks that, she realizes Philip is already standing nearby. Eren notices him as well and immediately recognizes the Emperor. Shock flashes across his face as he wonders why Philip is here. At the same time, Lyanna instinctively calls out Philip's name the moment she sees him. The reaction it provokes is immediate. Eren quickly grabs her face in alarm and questions whether she has completely lost her mind. He cannot believe she would casually say the Emperor's name out loud like that. Lyanna, already exhausted from dealing with him, demands to know what is wrong with him now. Eren hurriedly explains that calling the Emperor so casually could get her killed. However, in the middle of his warning, he suddenly pauses. A realization dawns on him as he remembers hearing Philip call this girl Lyanna earlier. His eyes widen in disbelief as he questions whether she is truly that infamous cousin who constantly bullies Alicia. Inside her head, Lyanna nearly bursts into tears. She wants to explain herself, but Eren is still holding onto her face so tightly that she can barely even speak properly. Eventually, Eren releases her, though his curiosity only deepens. He finds it strange because, from what he knows, Lyanna is not supposed to possess any special abilities at all. Yet despite that, her scent is overwhelmingly tempting to him. He cannot understand why she smells so delicious. Still fascinated, Eren leans toward her once again while muttering that this is very strange indeed. Alarmed, Lyanna quickly pushes him back again and demands to know what exactly he thinks he is doing now. At that same moment, Philip witnesses the entire scene unfolding before him. The sight instantly causes his heart to sink heavily inside his chest. Without hesitation, he steps forward and coldly calls out to the Tower Master. Then, with an icy glare directed straight at Eren, Philip firmly orders him to step away from Lyanna. 30 minutes earlier, Philip remains outside, lost within the turmoil of his own thoughts. He wonders grimly whether this condition is truly incapable of killing him, because although he cannot touch her even if he wishes to, he finds himself questioning exactly when his state is supposed to improve. The elders had previously informed him that he would eventually return to normal as long as they simply continued behaving as they usually do. Earlier, he had questioned his elders about something that had been troubling him deeply. He had asked them whether there were any side effects when the ailment began to subside. His words immediately leave them puzzled, prompting them to question what exactly he means by that. In response, Philip explains that ever since that day, his body has been behaving strangely with alarming frequency. The concern in the elders rises at once. They press him for answers, asking what is wrong, whether something has happened to his body, and what state he is currently in. Yet even Philip himself cannot provide a definite answer. Ever since he and Lyanna shared that kiss, everything has become abnormal. Whenever he looks at her, his heartbeat spirals out of control, thundering violently against his chest. His face grows unbearably hot even without the slightest touch between them. The moment their eyes meet, his thoughts scatter completely, leaving his mind frustratingly blank. Even when she is nowhere in sight, she remains trapped within his mind. He keeps thinking about her lips, about the warmth of that fleeting contact. Unable to make sense of it, he asks them whether none of this sounds strange to them as well. Even his heart itself feels odd, carrying a persistent tingling sensation that refuses to disappear. The Elder of Darkness instinctively attempts to explain what is truly happening. However, Before he can utter a single proper explanation, the Elder of Light abruptly stops him. With complete confidence, the Elder of Light assures Philip that those are merely recovery reactions, perfectly natural responses displayed by the body while healing. According to him, there is absolutely nothing to worry about. The Elder of Darkness immediately leans toward him in disbelief, whispering sharply as he questions whether the other has entirely lost his mind. Recovery reactions? Such absurd nonsense could hardly be considered a reasonable explanation, but the Elder of Light merely whispers back with shameless amusement, asking why he would ruin such an entertaining opportunity by telling Philip the truth. Still troubled, Philip asks what exactly he is supposed to do now. Is he simply expected to sit idly by and endure this? The elders tell him that there is nothing complicated about it. All he needs to do is continue maintaining regular physical contact with the young lady, and he will supposedly recover completely before long, yet hearing that advice only deepens Philip's suffering. At this rate, he is convinced that his heart will fail before any recovery ever arrives. Even if this truly is proof that his condition is improving, he cannot understand why it feels so unbearably unpleasant. Now that he has experienced her warmth even once, his instincts seem to crave it relentlessly. Every time he sees Lyanna, the desire resurfaces. He wants to touch her. He wants her to touch him. And each time those impulses arise, his treacherous heart responds in exactly the same impossible manner. Especially when Lyanna comes close to him, Philip's condition worsens beyond reason. The closer she stands, the deeper the blush spreads across his face. Before he can even properly meet her eyes, his composure already begins collapsing. He cannot help but wonder whether it is simply because his heart is beating far too quickly. When he is alone, the symptoms do seem to lessen somewhat. The relentless pounding eases just enough for him to think clearly again. Because of that, he begins considering whether he should consult the elders once more. Perhaps there is some way to slow down his heartbeat before it completely drives him mad. However, the very moment he steps inside, he is met with an utterly incomprehensible sight. Aaron is leaning suspiciously close to Lyanna, appearing as though he is trying to latch onto her once again. After hearing Philip's earlier explanation, Aaron himself had already become overwhelmingly confused by the entire situation. The instant he notices Philip's presence, panic flashes across his face. He hurriedly attempts to explain that this is all a misunderstanding, a complete accident. Just an accident. But in the very next breath, he suddenly claims to have remembered something extremely urgent that requires his immediate attention. Without waiting for permission, he announces that he is leaving. Lyanna immediately shouts after him, demanding to know where exactly he thinks he is going. She insists that he should apologize first for biting her neck. Yet Aaron stubbornly insists that he is truly busy, that he absolutely needs to leave at once, and before anyone can stop him, he vanishes in a frantic rush. Even after he disappears, confusion lingers heavily in the air. Aaron himself clearly had no idea what had just happened. Lyanna lets out an irritated growl, muttering under her breath as she questions what kind of bizarre individual that man actually is. Meanwhile, Philip's attention drifts elsewhere. Almost unconsciously, his gaze settles upon her neck. His hand reaches toward the place Aaron had bitten, brushing lightly against it. The motion immediately makes Lyanna question what is wrong. Philip quietly calls out to her before asking something that catches her completely off guard. He asks whether she touched the Tower Master as well, whether she touched him the same way she touched Philip. The scene shifts afterward to the carriage. The two of them sit inside together, enclosed within an uneasy silence that refuses to break. Lyanna studies him carefully before finally asking whether he is upset by any chance. Philip immediately denies it. Of course not. His answer arrives so quickly that it only convinces her further. Like hell, he is not upset. He has been acting like this ever since she finished explaining what happened with Aaron. After a brief silence, Philip corrects himself. Actually, he is not entirely sure. His chest feels strangely tight, as though something heavy has lodged itself inside him and refuses to move. He barely understands what this sensation even is. Lyanna points out that it certainly sounds like the behavior of someone who is upset. Her words cause him to tense slightly. He admits that this is the first time he has ever experienced a feeling like this, so he genuinely cannot tell. Not just this feeling. Everything ever since meeting her has been unfamiliar territory, holding hands, smiling together, feeling his heart race at the mere sound of his own name spoken by her voice. Every single experience feels painfully new, uncharted. He is inexperienced in all of this. Hearing that leaves Liana even more bewildered. She had always assumed he merely lived differently because of his unusual circumstances, but now she begins wondering whether his life has been far lonelier and far more isolated than she originally imagined. Philip hesitates before finally forcing the truth out. If this feeling truly is what people call being upset, then perhaps it is because he saw her with someone else. Liana immediately tries to interrupt, reminding him that she already explained what happened earlier. He quickly tells her that he knows. He knows it was nothing like what he imagined. He understands that. And yet, seeing her touch someone other than him had felt as though something unbearably heavy dropped straight into his chest. The confession leaves him sounding almost childish even to himself. Like a foolish child throwing unreasonable tantrums over things that make no sense. Liana immediately attempts to tell him that it is not like that. But Philip continues before she can finish. The truth is simple. The only person he can touch is Liana. She is all he has. Meanwhile, she can touch anyone she wants, not just him. He understands that such a thing is perfectly normal. He knows he has no right to feel this way. Still, frustration continues to claw at him no matter how much he tries to suppress it. Listening to him, Liana falls into thought. I ask this. Jealousy? The kind of jealousy someone feels when their closest friend suddenly makes another friend? To Philip, she is probably his very first real companion. But for her, ever since transmigrating into this novel, Philip had been the first person she genuinely spoke to as well. The realization strikes her suddenly. Without hesitation, she blurts it out. She tells him that he is the only one for her as well. She steps toward him and begins gently patting his head, causing him to pause in confusion as he wonders what exactly she is doing. In response, she explains that she is not someone who casually goes around touching people. The only individuals she has ever treated this way are him and Ariel. Hearing that, he questions whether that is truly the case. Without hesitation, she confirms it. Earlier, she had not been affectionately patting that irritating man at all. She had been yanking his hair out. Moreover, he is the only grown man whom she treats with such softness, almost as though she is soothing an oversized sheep. Those words bring an unmistakable smile to his face. She quickly adds that it will remain that way, so there is no reason for him to be concerned. At that, his expression softens further, and he quietly accepts her reassurance, telling her that if she says so, then he will stop worrying. The moment he says those words, her heart betrays her once again, beating wildly inside her chest. She inwardly panics, unable to understand why it keeps racing like this. At this rate, Philip is absolutely going to hear it. The only reasonable solution is to put some distance between them. Before she can do so, however, he reaches out and grabs her hand. The unexpected action makes her question what exactly he thinks he is doing. Yet instead of answering immediately, he leans closer, his gaze fixed entirely on her, and quietly reminds her that he is the only one allowed to touch her. Is he not? She instantly agrees, reaffirming that yes, that is exactly right. And then, without warning, he lowers his head and presses a kiss against her neck. The action leaves her utterly bewildered. Calmly, as though his behavior is perfectly logical, he explains that he has merely erased the place where the Tower Master touched her. In his eyes, it is simple now. He is the one who has touched her there instead. Her entire face burns crimson as she erupts in complete embarrassment, demanding to know what in the world he has just done. Rather than addressing her outrage, he warns her to be careful or she is going to lose her balance and fall. She immediately protests, insisting that falling is not the issue they should be discussing right now. His eyes remain fixed on her neck as he quietly remarks that the spot has swollen quite a bit. Still flustered beyond reason, she informs him that of course it is swollen. He bit her far harder than necessary. At that, guilt flickers across his expression. He murmurs that if he had reached her side sooner, none of this would ever have happened in the first place. Then, with sincere regret, he apologizes. She hurriedly tries to reassure him that she is genuinely fine. However, there is one very important matter she desperately needs to address. Could he please step back, even just a little? Because if he stays this close any longer, he is definitely going to hear the violent pounding of her heart. Instead of creating distance, he pulls her into his embrace. Refusing her request entirely, he quietly tells her no and asks her to remain like this for just a little while longer. Only now, after everything, can he finally breathe properly again. Unfortunately, poor Liana is the one left suffering through this situation. He softly calls her name. Then he calls it again. And again. His repeated murmuring leaves her thoroughly confused, making her question why he keeps saying nothing except her name. Finally, Philip speaks. He asks about what she had said earlier, whether she had truly meant it. Liana, still overwhelmed, questions what exactly he is referring to. He reminds her of her words. She had said that he was the only person allowed to touch her. He asks once more if she genuinely meant that.